this point.
Just finish it up. Let him finish it up. Let him finish it up. That should be the standard.
But I was thinking, first off, there's like 8 things, it has to be 4. And so instead of going through each of
What?
those 8 things, you
Yeah.
just say, okay, do we all agree that they need these 4?
Yes.
Just to shorten the process up a little bit,
Yeah.
Yeah.
unless there's
You're
an
more
objection.
within your
Yeah.
parameters on this
I'll kind
occasion.
I was
of
just
that.
a more general question, just
Hey.
process on each of these. Start off and just give us your summary.
Hey, AJ Williams. Nice to meet you.
We talk a little bit, then I open the public hearing.
I need to hear from the applicant. Is there anything up front?
No, you're all electronic. I didn't get this because I was down in Florida when it came out, so I just had to do. Oh, shit. I just got the whole thing. About 5 o'clock, we've all been here.
But to let them know,
Dedication.
we're going to work through this and ask you anything you need to know.
That's why I always get kind of funny is where the flow is after my report. After my report, then I guess you should always just say that you have to have anything else they want to add. But I mean, after my report, I guess we have them have anything, and then if the applicant has it. Yeah. Where's Chris? Let's give a couple more minutes for Chris. Denise.
Yeah.
Is that confidential?
Yeah. Says it was good. I was like, we're done. Moving on. Because it made sense, I think.
There's so much heartburn. It gives me there's so much circling around. There's so much repetition.
I wrote up a script for it to try to help with the voting a little bit, just to really
Just for the
hard just to
voting.
keep it straighter in my head.
Agreed.
That's what I thought.
Hopefully that will-
That's very good, Frank.
Well, just, well, because I mean, with this, it's a combination of all the details as well as the rules. And so I just sort of boiled it down to, okay, here are the rules. This is
Right.
what we need to vote on.
I agree.
See if it works.
We'll see if it works. That's right. You know, everything can just go south in a minute. You never know.
All right, we ready to start? Well, good evening. I'm going to call the February 12th meeting of the Yellow Springs Planning Commission to order. Welcome, everybody. Braving the wind to come out tonight. Would you call the roll, please?
Well, indeed. Doden.
Here.
McQueen.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
Pallotta.
Here.
Donnell.
Here.
Also present is Planning and Zoning Administrator Denise Swinger, and we hope at any second Village Solicitor Chris Connard.
Okay, I'm going to start off, just quickly review what's on the agenda for tonight. And we'll first do the page-by-page reviewing of the minutes of our last meeting. There's a couple of communications that are part of the packet. 2 communications, one from Alex Beery and one from Lisa Walters and Nate Cornett, both in support of the PUD. After that, we'll have a council report from Mary Ann. Then we'll have a period of citizen comments, and that first period of citizen comments is comments on anything that's not on the agenda for tonight. Then we have 2 public hearings, replat application by Chris Till, and then the second public hearing is a preliminary plan application for the PU rezoning for Millworks. And after that, we have a whole bunch of text amendments that the Planning Commission will have to consider before going on to our old business, new business, election of chair and election of vice chair, agenda planning, and then eventually adjournment. So, all right,
Sometime.
are you set, ready to go? Let's start by reviewing the minutes, please. Minutes from our meeting Monday, January 14th, 2019. Does anybody have any questions or corrections of page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? page 5 or page 6? Okay. Hearing no corrections, I move that we accept the minutes.
Second.
All in favor of accepting the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. All right. Council report?
Yes. At our last council meeting, we gave preliminary approval for this project to be designated as PUD preliminarily. I think the only other thing upcoming in council is there will be a proposal for beginning with a public meeting for transitory
Transit guest lodging.
transient lodging, which will probably at some point come back to Planning Commission.
Thank you. Okay, the next thing is a period for citizen comments for anything that's not on the agenda for the night. If anybody would like to make a citizen comment, please come up to the microphone, state your name, give your comment. Seem like there is any, so I guess we're done with that. All right, we will move on then to the first of the public hearings, the REPAT application by Chris Till. So Denise, would you give us a summary of that?
Okay. We were reviewing this last month and decided to bring Chris back again. There were some sections within the code that wasn't completely vetted. What the replat is for is to take 3 non-conforming adjoining lots and changing that into 2 conforming lots. With the replat application, there's a new section in the replat in the planning code that allows for, actually uncommon lots have been allowed in the planning code for a long time, but we've actually now added them into replat applications where you can have 20 feet of frontage. So this, after doing a little bit more research on this, and it's up there on the board, the parallel line that is horizontal to the street is the front yard lot line. The 2 vertical lines coming off of that are the side yard lot lines, and those carry down, whether they turn or move around, they end up at the rear yard lot line. And so those are the 2, and that's where I was wanting to get a little bit more clarification on, and the code actually pretty much defined that for me with definitions. So staff is asking for approval of this replat. This is going to create 2 conforming lots that are, the second lot would be buildable. The applicant, later on, I think as a condition of that we could put on that if you want to, I mean, I'm going to be, at some point, whenever it is buildable, would then look at the setbacks. But Mr. Till has agreed to keep, to lessen the impact on any neighbors. The neighbors at the back of this property would have 20 feet of frontage between the house and the property line, the backyard property line, which goes with the code. The western side yard lot line actually goes down towards a property that houses facing Tully Street, and so their backyard looks into this area, and he will keep that a setback at least 10 feet, having 5 feet on the other side. So I'm just asking for Planning Commission's approval of this request.
Anybody have any questions? Chris, would you like to say anything more tonight, or?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think Denise summarized it, and I think we really went in very deep last time. We covered from that, it looks like. So unless there's any, I'd be happy to answer any questions other than that.
They may have any questions.
You want to see if any?
We're going to open it for public comment. Seeing none, I guess I'll close the public hearing on that one. Any further questions or concerns up here? All right. Anybody want to make a motion?
I move that we accept staff's recommendation.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the recommendation for the replat. Would you call the roll for the vote, please?
Yes, Pallotta.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Danell.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Doden.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your patience. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a preliminary plan application for the PUD rezoning for the Millworks property at 305 North Walnut Street. We'll start, Denise, with
Sure.
giving, because the PUD process is complicated, it'll be kind of a rather detailed summary of everything.
Yeah, I'm going to
I have
give.
to recuse
Oh, yes, you
myself.
have to
Oh,
recuse.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm going to do a summary of the PUD application. I do want to let people know that there has been a last-minute change that is at your table as a result of, my understanding as a result of talking with neighbors. The owners have decided to not have the flex space any longer. And that will be where the Children's Museum will be located. And that will definitely have an impact on the parking that will reduce the parking quite a bit, which I will try to clarify as I go through this. Okay, at council's meeting on February 4th, which Mary Ann had mentioned, the council allowed us, planning commission, to continue looking at this as a possible planned unit development on less than 5 acres. They were only voting on the fact that we can look at it, not on the actual application itself. So we had a work session on February 5th with the owner, Jessica Yamamoto. Antonio was not at that meeting, and architect Ted Danell. And the Planning Commission had some specific information that they requested out of that meeting. One specifically was to determine if a children's science center can be located near a brewery. Also, we needed more information on the open space percentage and to provide any requests for deviations to the minimum requirements, the size of the tap room, the number of dwelling units, and number of parking spaces. So on the table tonight is that revision, as I mentioned, as a result of neighbors' feedback. So as we go through this, the request to rezone to a PUD allows more flexibility in land, and the applicants have said that pretty much a lot of the uses that exist right now do fall under what is I-1, which is mixed-use industrial, but several of them don't. And so this PUD will look, and it will be basically the layering under it will be I-1 and B-1, which is Central Business District. The 3 uses that are being proposed that are not under I-1, which are already grandfathered in, are the hostel, the 30-bed hostel, which will be on the location, if you can see the Fairfield, Yellow Springs Fairfield Pike, where the parking area will be there, the red is the hostel, and those 3 in a row, 6 buildings of blue are the artist studios.
They're 2 each, so it'll be a total of 12 artist studios on the ground floor with residential lofts on the upper floor. Those are 2 uses that are allowed in the B1, but not in the I1s, and this is another reason why they're going for the PUD. The third thing would be the Children's Museum, the Science Museum. That would be something that would be allowed in the B1, but not typically in the I1. So, moving along with that. There's a number of qualifying conditions in order to be approved for a PUD. And I'm going to go through these. The first one is recognizable benefit. And you have to have at least 3 benefits out of the list of 8 that qualifies. The applicants did apply for each of these criteria. Preservation of significant natural features, a complementary mix of land uses or housing types, extensive open space and recreational amenities, connectivity of open space with new or existing adjacent greenway or trail corridors, preservation of small town appeal, improvements to public streets or other public facilities that mitigate traffic and/or other development impacts, coordinated development of multiple small parcels, or removal or renovation of blighted building sites or contamination cleanup. Staff's assessment of that is that we agree with the property owners for number 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8, which is a complementary mix of land uses, extensive open space and recreational amenities, connectivity of open space with the trail corridors, improvements to the public streets or other public facilities that mitigate traffic, and removal or renovation of blighted buildings. What we didn't agree with, we're not aware of any significant natural features that are on that site to preserve. We also don't feel an existing industrial site typically lends itself to small town appeal. And 7, it is staff's opinion that 2 parcels, the 1 3-acre and 1 acre, don't qualify as multiple small parcels. However, number 8, which is kind of an either or on that, they do intend to demolish one of the buildings on the 1 acre, and there's a lot of excavation materials and equipment that are strewn across that property. They intend to clean that up as well, and that would definitely be a benefit for people traveling down Fairfield Pike or coming from the Little Miami Scenic Trail. I think I'll just go through these, and then you can come back, decide if you agree, how we want to vote on these. So it's staff's opinion that the requirement for recognizable benefit is met. Size, the council agreed with a minimum of 5 acres, but let me take you through on the actual requirements for rezoning for the size. Rezoning the area to PUD will not result in a significant adverse effect upon nearby or adjacent village lands. The proposed uses will complement the character of the surrounding area. The purpose and qualifying conditions of the PUD district can be achieved within a smaller area. The PUD is not being used as a means to circumvent conventional zoning requirements. As I said,
Denise, I have a question. Number 3, is that the second to last word, is that a smaller area or similar? Is it
smaller
supposed to be
area.
smaller?
Smaller, yeah, because typically the PUD has to be at least 5 acres. So staff agrees that these qualified conditions for size are met. If Planning Commission, we can go back around later on that if you feel differently, we'll find that out after this. And then C, utilities, the PUD shall be served by public water and sanitary sewer, and Johnny Burns, the Public Works Director, indicated that the capacities are there for electric, water, and sewer, and any aid to construction will be on the property owners. The Ownership, we are aware of who the owners are as far as getting all the documentation related to any agreements or contracts that we might go into as far as getting any of the construction and conditions that might be put on this done would typically be done at the final plan. Then the comprehensive plan, number E, and vision, staff agrees it is in line with the comprehensive plan and vision. And on page 7, I highlighted for you something that was in the 2010 comprehensive plan that talked about a survey that had been done in 1973 and then again in 1990 when there were neighborhood forums talking about how we didn't want to discourage anything that takes away from the downtown area. However, and I highlighted this, however, small alternative commercial areas that do not rival the focal point character of downtown are seen as realistic and accommodating the overall quality of village life. And then in planning for the central business district should include desired development patterns and preferences regarding the direction of expansion. New or modified development in the district should reflect its legacy of relatively small lots, high density, a pedestrian orientation, and mixed uses. For example, shops on the ground floor and offices, studios, light production, or residences on the second floor. So I feel, that pretty much does gel with what the comprehensive plan was looking for. And if you also look at trends today, that's coming up with in planning, it's a lot of mixed use and to strengthen the neighborhoods. Under PUD requirements, and that pretty much finalized, okay, that was for that. Then pedestrian accommodation, definitely staff feels that is going to be a win for the community with what their plan is to take out. Right now, it was difficult for me to even try to figure out how many buildings there are because they're all melded together. And they intend to break these out, these corridors, and make green space pathways in between. And those will be ways also to enter off of the bike path. The architecture, the existing buildings are going to be restored to their original conditions, and the new buildings are going to be have an industrial look using repurposed shipping containers. For traffic, that is a staff concern. North Walnut Street has typically, borne a lot of the traffic for the activities that go on at Millworks. With this new design, the property owner is actually going to make paved parking and will have 2 locations for ingress and egress. Not only would you enter off of North Walnut Street, but also off of Fairfield Pike, which right now it just doesn't really lend itself to knowing that you can even go that direction. Of course, one of the things, and we can discuss this later, is to try to have some sort of parking traffic impact study on that before the final plan. And then eligible districts, any land within any zoning district may qualify for PUD zoning. So they're currently in I-1 district. All the adjacent properties are within the I-1 district. There's a couple more residential. There's a art studio home at the corner that's also in the industrial. The Bushworks and the former Herb Lumber is also under the industrial. And those will remain the industrial district.
Denise, could you clarify again which residents are within I-1? So would it be the residents on the east side of Walnut within that block,
Do you have a,
or both sides?
there should be Exhibit A, yes.
Yes, I see Exhibit A.
Okay, so Exhibit A, if you it actually includes this here, and it also goes down there.
Okay, and it's on the east side of the
It's,
street.
yeah, it takes you, it borders, the east side of Walnut Street and the south side of Fairfield.
Okay,
And it also then borders
Cliff.
Cliff Street on the, north side of
So are the
Cliff.
houses on Cliff Street part of I-1 as well, or?
If they're on the side where Bushworks is, I think there
Yes,
might be
Would
one,
be the south.
maybe one.
Yes. Well, there's the
Maybe
house on the
two.
corner of
Yeah,
Walnut and
but that might
Cliff
actually
and-
have a Walnut address, yeah. But not, the houses on the other side of Cliff Street are in the, are RC, residential C. So, for requirements. For permitted uses, as I mentioned, all uses proposed are allowed with, as long as you're, designate what zoning districts you're using, and we'll be using B1 and I1. Minimum lot size and zoning requirements. In the case of a mix of uses, the zoning requirements applicable to each category shall apply to that use. So, makes it very interesting on how you have to determine parking and those kinds of things. But when you look at the land itself, B1 allows you to pretty much have a 0 lot line. You can have 90% coverage of your lot, whereas industrial is a little more restrictive and requires the setbacks, which some of these setbacks are already grandfathered in because they're a lot closer towards the bike path than would normally be allowed if you were building an industrial lot. So for the purpose of this, the lot and width requirements have been met for both I1 and B1. And so has the lot coverage requirements for both I1 and B1. And this is taking into consideration the existing buildings as well as the proposed. On page 10, I put together a little chart of what the proposed uses are. And of course, if you can see on there, I had the theater, trade shows, concerts, demonstration, collaborative projects, performance recital space. Those are all now going to be removed according to this change that they've made. For connectivity, pathways for bicycles and pedestrians shall be incorporated throughout the development, and I think that they've done a really excellent job with showing that. They've got pedestrian bike accesses, several of those off the bike trail. That being said, I think we need to make sure that there's some sort of study on pedestrian safety with all of this. Modification of minimum requirements. In order to have any deviations from the minimum requirements for the uses being proposed, they have to satisfy at least four of the following criteria. 1, preserve the best natural features of the site. 2, create, improve, or maintain open space for the residents, employees, and visitors beyond the minimum required. The applicants did not provide a narrative for that. But they did provide some green space calculations in Exhibit F. They determined the open space percentage using lot coverage calculations, but parking lots are excluded in this formula. However, when staff recalculated the open space percentage, it still is well over the minimum requirement of 15%. Commit that at least 10% of all dwelling units in the PUD will be permanently affordable units, or 20% affordable units or commit to a payment in lieu as agreed to with the village council. The property owners have committed that 25%, that accounts for 3 of the artist dwelling, rental dwelling units will be permanently affordable. And that will have to have some kind of agreement at some point on what that is and with whom. Provide a mix of residential types, that's not applicable. Employ low-impact design. They are going to be low-impact design or other best practices to manage stormwater and reduce the off-site impacts of runoff. They are going to be putting new piping in that's going to detain the stormwater and release it slowly into the existing system. They're going to be adding new storm piping and catch basins running along the existing building to a new detention pipe and bioswale system along the bike trail. The new development will also collect stormwater along the bike trail to a detention pipe system under the parking structure at Fairfield. And the detention will discharge into the Fairfield drainage system. And this was reviewed by the Public Works Director. They didn't apply for number 6, employ practices and site layout. Other than the, what I mentioned on the 1 acre lot with the hostel and the residential lofts, everything is existing buildings. And 8 include a mix of residential and non-residential uses, which this, by virtue of having the artist lofts over the studios along adjacent to the hostel and with the other things proposed, the non-residential uses proposed, it does have that. So in order to deviate from the land use requirements in these applicable district regulations, you have to meet at least 4 of the 8 criteria. The applicants proposed 6 they believe they can meet. 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, and 8. Of those 6, staff agrees with 3, 5, 7, and 8. Number 1 relates to preserving natural features, and I'm just not convinced that there are natural features to preserve. The Planning Commission may have a different opinion on that. Number 2 relates to the creation of open space beyond the minimum required. They did now provide that, and so it does, they're not really asking for that. You could include it if you were having an issue with some of the others. I calculated 29%. You had to have at least 25%, but that tends to be when you're asking for residential density, which they're not asking for. They don't have to ask for residential density for the lofts over the live work studios. They don't have to ask for residential density requirements for hostels. So it's staff's opinion that the criteria for modification of the minimum requirements has been met. The owners are proposing the following modifications, and they have put it in writing what they are requesting. They want to remove the 30% of retail incidental to the manufacturing for the Yellow Springs Brewery. They want to allow for a deviation to the number of parking spaces with the justification that the total number of spaces will be rarely used at the same time due to the varied hours of operation. Plus, they're adding a number of bike parking as well. For number E, density bonus. Again, they really didn't need to have that requirement. So we can pretty much skip that. The next one, open space, as I mentioned, they meet at least 15% of that. And Exhibit F that you have in your packet shows a total building footprint of 55,000 square feet, an exterior hardscape area, sidewalks, patios of 13,750 square feet, which doesn't really require that you add that in as a calculation. However, it was difficult for staff to calculate the required yard. So even with adding that in, the property at 3.997 acres still has a green space area of 50,359 square feet, or 29%, which was well over the required 15% that was needed. So that is met. For the general provisions, you will have to decide tonight on these conditions. The conditions need to ensure that public services and facilities will be capable of accommodating increased loads, protect the environment, natural environment, conserve natural resources, ensure compatibility with adjacent uses of land, meet the intent and purpose of the code, and be related to the standards established in the code for the proposed PUD, and ensure compliance with the final development plan, which will obviously come later. There aren't any interior streets. You're aware of the time limits. For the review process, the pre-application conference did happen with the Public Works Director and me. We met with the architect to review the proposed development. We identified the underlying infrastructure, and the Public Works Director provided more information on the electric, water, sanitary, and storm system, both on and near the property. So tonight is the preliminary PUD application. If this is approved, then it goes to council with a recommendation of approval, or it can be a recommendation of denial, or it can be a recommendation of approval with modifications. And then council has to do the same thing as well. This is a lot to digest, so if you want to kind of go over some of the things that might be of concern. If you want to maybe start with, want to review just the deviations. For example, we have in the planning code, the 30% retail to the production on the brewery. And this just is, they've just grown so much that I didn't know where that requirement came from. So I did a little bit of research on that. And there isn't anything in the Ohio code. I then went and talked to via email to the owners of the brewery, who said that with the expansion, they'll still be considered, even with the expansion, they will still be designated as a small craft brewery by Ohio's definition. And it's based on the volume of beer that they produce, but there isn't any Ohio code that limits the size of the tap room or even relates it to the size of a production facility. So that was something that we had.
Can you remind us what's the increased amount of space for the tap room?
We can verify that with the architect, but I think it's all probably about the same size as the production. Is there?
I mean, compared to what it is now, is it doubling or?
Compared to what it is now.
My name is Ted Donnell. I'm the architect representing the owners. What we're actually asking for is that there not be a percentage of restriction for any retail that is manufactured and sold on site. And that would include food production or distillery or spirits or the brewery.
I don't understand. Are you talking about the space or the volume of transaction?
When Millworks was approved through the new zoning code, and then the brewery went into the Millworks place, Planning Commission at that time put a restriction on how much of a percentage of retail sale per floor area they were allowed to provide relative to their production space. So that's where that 30% came from. And
So the current tap room can only be 30% of their total
Same.
space.
that's correct.
So that doesn't have anything necessarily to do with the size of the tap room.
Well, yeah,
Correct.
because we have to put the tap room down to where it's no more than 30% of the production.
No, what I mean, I guess my question really is, what the tap room is a certain size now. What's the proposal in terms of increase the size of the tap room?
The new tap room will be approximately, in addition to the old tap room and the outside deck area, will be approximately the same size of their entire production area.
And their letter asks for unlimited, right?
Yes.
That's what I think we're going with too. You're looking, asking for an unlimited amount.
Right. If you, basically for anybody who makes a product on site, if you want to sell that product on site, you have no limits to how big your retail area is, as opposed to limiting it to some percentage of that floor area for production.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is because I would imagine people living in the area would be primarily concerned with the number of cars and people moving in and out. So I'm trying to get a sense of what potentially would be the increase, and yeah, of course, you can't really say, but you might be able to say, well, if we're doubling in size, then maybe we're going to be 50% more people, or 100. That's my concern.
Yeah.
Not the percentage of retail to total production. I don't really see that as an issue.
Well, right now, that's just the way that the industrial layer of zoning is applied to this development. So with respect to the brewery, that's the thing. I'm talking about an artist studio loft. On a weekend, the artist can open up his studio and sell out of his studio because he's making his product there. And that percentage in and of itself may be larger than the 30% if we use that formula across this whole PUD. And so, and then I can go from, if you have a food production place, if they're actually do grow some hydroponics and those are servicing the food service in some manner, then we don't want to be restricted to a percentage of that sales area for a sit-down restaurant that may in fact be a part of that test kitchen, commercial kitchen.
I guess I'm still coming back, and maybe this isn't the place to talk about it. I would imagine that people who live in the area are mostly concerned about traffic coming in and out. So to the degree that we can sort of predict by these changes how much traffic will come in and out, that seems like that's, to me, the most important thing. And in particular, the brewery attracts a lot of people, as we know. It's going to get bigger. So I'd like to have a sense of how many more people are going to come in and out, given that, of course, we can't really know, but we could know somewhat by the increased of seating size.
Yeah, the brewery is, their capacity is so maxed out now that it's difficult. People are turning away. So they're coming to the door, it's packed solid, they turn around, they leave. The brewery doesn't think that they're going to actually serve that many more patrons with the expansion. It's just that you're going to have the ability to have more people in the same building. I mean, if that makes any sense. Their sales are their sales, and it's probably going to continue to be that way. However, I will say that the hours of operation for a lot of these things are different. Some of the studios the studios might do something during the day. Food service, whatever, is going to be more during the day, and the brewery is closed during the day. So it's hard to look at this and say, well, we can count all these cars that are coming in here and do a traffic study based on complete maximum occupancy and full occupancy at all time. And I would say, yeah, there would be a problem, but I can't see that that's going to happen.
Well, I'll ask one more question and stop. Right now, the tap room presumably has seating for a certain number of people, and I understand people just stand too. And it gets bigger, it's going to have seating for a certain number more of people. Do you have that information, what the current seating capacity is and what the future seating capacity, or maybe it would be the fire department?
Yeah, with the occupancy of the building.
Yeah.
I don't
Whether
have
they're
the
standing or
occupancy
sitting.
of the new tap room because we haven't designed it.
You know
I mean, we
what-
haven't gotten that far.
What the square footage of the
Yeah,
current
that's
tap room is
actually in
versus
the,
square footage
Yeah,
of the
the-
proposed tap room?
He has the taproom retail sales area is 4,700 square feet. That's on his latest one that you,
Oh, this is-
yeah, your latest one.
sure
Yeah.
there's a form.
And then the I'm assuming, Ted, the 3,500 square feet is actual usable floor area?
Are you on parking ratios?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
That's-
so, and the same with the exterior hardscape of 6,500 square feet, 2,500 square feet is usable floor area.
Correct.
So he calculated, and when I recalculated based on that, we came up with exactly the same based on what the requirements are for parking in the code, which would be 120 spaces. Which definitely is the bulk of the parking that's gonna be needed. The other one, the other,
No, but I have a question for Denise.
the distillery isn't gonna, they're gonna increase their production area, but not their retail area.
When this, assuming we approve the preliminary plan and they come back for the final plan, can we put a limit on the size of the tap room?
There's a question I have with that too, because unlimited is a big word. I mean, unlimited just leaves it wide open. Is
Yeah.
there anything that we can, to put a condition on that? That makes sense that we might want to look at something like that.
Certainly. I think we need to look at what, and maybe we can get Lisa Walters and Nate to explain why, I mean, they've had a rapid growth and see, and just get something more definitive from them.
Okay.
Realizing that they're not building or expanding the buildings themselves. They're just growing into existing buildings,
Just have more visitors.
more visitors, right? And, and then we have to also look at the fact that we also have a better defined parking lot rather than gravel where people park any which way they want. And then, there'll be a second entrance and exit to the property, which will also help alleviate. So, and that's why I suggested maybe that we make that a condition, is to try to do some sort of traffic impact based on, if this is what you're gonna expect to have for this, what do you think that will be? Looking at the hours of operation that they wanna have, as well as the hours of operation for the other uses.
Yeah, we just need to figure out what their occupancy is now and what they envision.
How those two things compare.
Right.
Any other questions, planning commission members at this point? At this point, would the architects or the owners like to say anything that we haven't spoken about, or hasn't been presented in the summary? A few minutes, doesn't have to be terribly detailed. Please just give your names.
My name is Jessica Yamamoto,
My name is Antonio Molina.
and our vision for the Millworks property is that we bring it to life. And so far, the brewery has done a really good job of that, of being a family-friendly environment, a place where people can come to and play euchre on a Tuesday evening, or have a game of Scrabble. And with their expansion, I think that would allow for more people to be able to sit and enjoy dinner, sit and enjoy some games. And as it is right now, there's standing room only. So a lot of times, families like our own, we can't even sit down and enjoy ourselves. We have to pick up food from the food truck and go home and eat instead of hang out. So I think if there's more opportunity for people to come and hang out, to stay a while, to engage in the community and to spend time with one another, I think that the art studio, the collaborative art space, provides that opportunity for community members to come in and collaborate with one another, with borrowing tools from one another, sharing studio space, being able to use a CNC machine or a large printer that they couldn't have in their own home, or maybe they can't afford. So that's something that they would be able to share and use. The hostel also is another place where young people or can come and create community. And I think all of this really feeds into the downtown area. I think it's a good supplement. I think it is going to be a really great supplement for the community and a place where people can gather. And I think the corridors opening up will also bring the bike path into the property.
What she
Yeah.
said. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess, open it up for,
I have one question.
no, I'm sorry.
When we said the science center and the flex is going away, is the science going to the flex?
Yeah.
And then what's happening with
The
where the science?
distillery's going to use that area for
Okay.
production.
Gotcha.
Open up the public hearing then. I think I'm going to ask people to obviously step forward, tell us your name, and time limit. I think we're going to have a time limit since there's so many people here that, I presume everybody's, how many people want to talk?
Could we ask where they live in relationship?
Yeah, okay,
I'd like-
okay. Maybe try to
2 minutes?
limit it to 3 minutes.
2? How about
2 minutes, 2 minutes. Okay, so please, come forward, state your name, and tell us where you live, what your connection is, that sort of thing. Okay.
Hi, I'm Christy Moore. I live on North Winter Street. I work at the brewery. And I have a few concerns. One, the fact that the new owner's speech sounded more like a brewery investor's speech kind of gives me pause, because there's an entire property with many businesses in it already existing. The second thing that gives me pause is that the new owners are blatantly misleading people about the distillery space, because the distillery is not having their lease renewed. So I feel like the fact that they're putting that into their pro-brewery plan seems very misleading. So that's a lot of space that they're claiming that the distillery is going to have. And I would also say that I also find it misleading that saying this is going to be an artist space when they're not renewing the lease of current artists, again, seems misleading. So, yeah. Again, Christy, work at the brewery.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm Carrie Schoiner. My husband and I own S&G Artisan Distillery down in the Millworks. I just wanted to clear up and let people know. I see that when we're looking at this sheet here, okay, in the pink, it's showing us in 2 locations. First of all, we can't do that with our permits. We would not be permitted to do that with the TTB or the Division of Liquor Control. We were planning on expanding when the former owners had it. We have a current space. The new owners wanted to move us to the back of the building. In order for us to be able to do that, we have to completely abandon our space. We cannot manufacture and we cannot sell. It would take up to 2 years, could take up to 2 years for all that to happen. So, and this is for them to make some changes to the building. That's why they needed us to move and to abandon our space and to put us into the back. I don't want this to be deceptive to people. We will not be on the bike path. We will not be expanding, and we will be out of business January 2020. So I just wanted to let the community know that we will be exiting.
Can we ask questions?
I'm Tim McLendon, my wife Pam. On the map there, the little L-shaped thing right on the left side, that's us. Our backyard will butt up against parking spaces and dumpsters. That, as we look at it, does not enhance the quality of our life. It may enhance the neighborhood, but it won't enhance our situation. We anticipate a whole lot more traffic back there, a whole lot more pedestrians wandering around. And it's very likely that what we will have to do is put a fence around our property to keep people from wandering around. I don't know what it'll cost, but won't be free. So it may be a wonderful thing to the neighborhood. It may be a wonderful thing to the village. We don't anticipate it being a wonderful thing for us.
Thank you, Tim.
He lives on Walnut.
I'm Rosanna Dufault. I live on Walnut Street, and I have some concerns about the hostel culture that's being promoted. I'm wondering if that won't detract from the Airbnb owners in the rest of the village. And I'm also concerned about potential crime in the area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, John Hudson. We like some of the ideas that they are proposing. The only thing I want to comment on is the traffic on Walnut Street, the beginning of Walnut from Dayton Street back with the curve and the rise and the parking on both sides of the street. It's becoming rather untenable, dangerous, especially at wet nights. I'd like the village to think about maybe no parking on the west side or something to make it a real safe and functional street, especially as probably there will be more traffic. So, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Will Phipps, fairly new resident of Yellow Springs in our third year. My wife Julie and I frequent to that area, the brewery and the distillery. So with what we just heard, this portrayal of the projection of the community, that's the future, right? That's not like today and we're going to draw up a new one. So if what I heard is correct, there's a distillery on there. This is a long-term plan, but so you'll have to answer that. What's real and what's the deal? Now, I would like to see like Mr. Hudson, is that right? Okay. It'd be great if indeed that area is improved. If you'd have paved the parking lot, you guys would have been golden. So there's that, that's kind of a long time overdue. So I guess I'm a little concerned. What else is maybe not as it's portrayed? That's a big deal, I think.
Thank you, Will.
I'm Richard Lapidus. I live on Limestone Street. However, my studio, I'm a sculptor, and my studio has been in the Millworks I share a building that's portrayed there with Mike Jones, who's a ceramicist and I'm a man of all seasons. The enhancements, the recreation of the Millworks, which is neither fish nor fowl right now, into an all-purpose amenity is pretty amazing. And I don't know anyone who isn't pretty excited about it, to tell you the truth. Fresh energy, young energy, I think smart energy. And yeah, they're going to be, whenever change is made, and relative to the size of our village, it's a rather big change, there are going to be side effects that are imperfect, as with all change. I am just delighted to, as a user of the property over many years, I think 10 years, to see it finally completing its transition into a all-purpose, I'll call it a maker space. It's a place where people who make things, craft people, artists, can find community and a home. We all need it. It's a place where visitors can interact, not only with each other and with villagers, but also with the things that mark our community as different from the rest of the county. So I urge that we act thoughtfully. I understand some issues are imperfect. I also urge us to not require the applicant to be able to foretell the future perfectly. I think that'll be real hard for anybody in the room to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
I just have a question. I'm Chris Hodson. I live on North Walnut Street. I'm 2 doors from the brewery. I just have a question on the north parcel, 1 acre parcel, how it connects to the lower parcel. And the entrance, is there going to be enough space for traffic to get from one to the other? It looks like the opening from the north parcel to the south parcel is very, very narrow. And I didn't know if the traffic off of Fairfield is going to basically stay in the north part, and then the traffic off Walnut will basically be parking cars for the southern section. So that's the question I have.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm Melissa Heston, and our residence is on Fairfield, Yellow Springs Road. We are on the bike path right behind what's currently EnviroFlight and part of the production of the brewery. So we're the Bryan Center Woods, then our property, Diane Chittister's property, and then Fairfield. We have been through the transitions of the millworks, which has been exciting and challenging at times. The things that we're most concerned about, the use of the property are the transientness of the hostel. We're thinking that it might not be resident friendly. We do feel that the drainage, if you are really truly committed to the concerns of the drainage and taking care of the drainage and how it drains into the spring, we've had a course of the last 2 weeks have been inundated with the amount of water coming from Millworks and the back of the bike path. Anyone who wants to walk Fairfield right across from the duck pond or walk our lane can see that the drainage is just really overwhelming. More of a concern for us too is the traffic. Walnut Street can be dangerous, especially at night, especially without with the lots of pedestrian traffic going up and down Walnut without sidewalks. So they're having to contend with parking, not being visible to drivers going back and forth. I'm also concerned with the entrance on Fairfield and there being a 1-lane bridge that they would have to travel under going in and out. So the density, the drainage, the transient hostel, I just feel like everything's kind of pushing into residential area.
I guess I'll talk here. So, My name is Matthew Kirk, and I live on Southview Drive. And I guess my concerns are a little bit different. You know, I read this book a number of years back, Industry is for Small Communities by Arthur Morgan, which talked a lot about how Yellow Springs kind of came to be. How do we get our businesses? And by and large, business in Yellow Springs has always been kind of grown from within. We've homegrown our businesses. In fact, at the current Millworks property, 2 of our most recent successes are there. The brewery itself, and then also EnviroFlate, who I'm surprised no one has brought it up, but under this plan would actually be displaced. This is my understanding. And that to me is a major concern. That's the exact kind of success story we need to be talking about. The reality is we're not going to catch some big fish, big corporation. We never have done that in the past. And so we need to focus really on incubating more 20, 30-person businesses, exactly like what EnviroFlate, what the brewery are. And this space right here, right now, is one of the few industrial zones that we have in the village. We just don't have a lot of space like this. We don't have small space that's raw, relatively inexpensive, but that people have been able to accumulate some of. And so fully transitioning this property to a PUD, I think in a lot of ways is going to, you know, we're fundamentally changing the property that they bought. They bought an industrial property in a small community that really is vital not only to our current economic success, but our future economic success. And we want to transition to something else that really just feeds more into our tourist culture. When I look up there, I don't see a lot of jobs that come with the hostel or the artist loft, or I know it's the flex space isn't there, or the children's museum, which as somebody alluded to, there are many aspects of this plan. You know, it's a plan, it's high level, but in all likelihood are very fluid. I mean, how does one fund a children's science museum? I imagine it's hard, requires a lot of grant writing. It's very uncertain. There's not a lot of immediate revenue streams. So I would caution you not to throw away the past for the promise of a lot of the buzzwords of economic development today, but to maybe focus on some of the things that got us to where we are. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Colton Pitstick. You're going to have to forgive me. I'm making this a little briefer. I wrote something up ahead of time. I'm a writer and an actor, an artist and member of Yellow Springs Theater Company. I'm an insect farmer currently employed in EnviroFlate, but I'm speaking personally. On the surface, this plan looks great. It carries the trappings of futuristic development. Shipping container homes and mixed-use spaces. It seems amazing. Yet, I am caught up and unimpressed by the buzzwords and the blueprints. All the stuff in the paper that I read makes it sound like all these restaurants and studios will help disenfranchise artists and change the community for the better, but I keep getting hung up on one small issue. In a few years, my job will no longer exist, a job that I work at and have worked hard for. For the first time in a long time, because of my job, I have health insurance. I can go to a doctor. This little change of status has radically altered my life. I can go to the doctor when I am sick instead of hoping for the best and going to the hospital when ailments turn for the worst. And yet, in just a few short years, that'll be gone. If you want to support artists, give them health insurance and give them access to good-paying jobs. Hostels and restaurants provide employment, but they fall short of enough to get by. It seems as though these renovations want to attract artists in town, but what about the ones that are already here? I know countless artists burdened by low wages and lack of benefits, and the only way out of the unending avalanche of bills and bills and more bills is better wages. EnviroFlate and companies like it, for better or for worse, provide those wages. I am an artist who, due to my employment, can create art. Good jobs can't enrich the soul, and they can't get creative juices flowing. But what they can do is put food on the table and fill a savings account for the first time. What the new owners of the Millworks have done is put the nail in the lid of the coffin for 22 good jobs. Among my coworkers are artists and musicians, first-time homeowners, and first-time parents. But it seems their lives, our lives, don't matter. It seems that this is too late, but I would certainly hope that the village would at least acknowledge in some way how detrimental all this development is. You know, as a community, we have our roots in the farms around us. Agriculture is a part of our identity and our history, and EnviroFlate is the future of agriculture. And yet, as we stand on the precipice, hands outstretched, almost able to grab hold of that future, we're going to let it go and let another restaurant try to fill the void. Bugs are a part of the future of agriculture, and they aren't pretty, but they are sustainable. What isn't sustainable is a village economy based on restaurants and tourists. This plan does nothing to help the lower class, and it's zany, and it's kooky, and it's fun, but it lacks the sort of jobs that can help someone get out of debt. By approving this plan, we're simply letting the wealthy and well-off again push aside and play with the lives of the poor and the working class. Instead of wantonly shoving shipping containers on the edge of town, why not ask artists what they need? Volunteer time and money with organizations that are trying to address the needs of artists within the community. You know, there's talk of things like building a theater, and believe me, that's something that I know that we need. But there's organizations that are already trying to do that in this community. But this isn't about filling the needs of the community. This plan is about building a playground for the elite. It's about those at the top making profit off an investment they made with willful ignorance to the repercussions for those at the bottom. Hostels and shipping containers aren't what the artists of YS need, plain and simple. By allowing this project to go through, we're saying it's okay to move in and buy out and do what you want as long as you have money, and that it's okay to mess up 22 lives. It's not the image I want for this town. And I would hope beyond hope that my village, my town, won't be so quick to kowtow to the whims and the wants of the rich. Thank you.
Michelle Burns, I live at 100 East Fairfield Pike. I'm mostly going to just support comments that have already been made by John on Walnut, as well as Melissa at the Fairfield Pike ingress egress there. I mean, all of you know that's a one-lane bridge. The ingress egress is really close to that bridge, so I would encourage you to go ahead and do that traffic impact study. Also, in my years living there, people are just flying from that turn on 68 to that one-lane bridge. I can't wait to get there. So, I mean, people are moving much faster than you would anticipate. So I really, really suggest that you do that impact study. There are no sidewalks there on Fairfield Pike on our stretch, as you know. I mean, most of that isn't in the village. I realize that's not your bailiwick, but if you could do that pedestrian safety study as well, I would really encourage you to do that. And then finally, the only thing I would ask is that you relook at the parking. I mean, parking is inadequate as it is, so to allow any reduction in parking requirements, I think would be a really detriment to those people on Walnut. And I think the parking will extend out from there along the side streets. So parking is just a nightmare over there as it is. And then drainage, as Melissa said. Just walked through that bridge tonight on your way home. It's a nightmare.
Thanks, Michelle.
Hi, I'm Liz Kutzos. I'm the president of EnviroFlight. And I just want to, thank Colton because what he said. We do employ 22 people. We did just recently open the first commercial black soldier fly manufacturing facility in the United States, thanks to people like Colton and Dan and the rest of our staff who built this business and have created something amazing for sustainability and animal nutrition and human nutrition around the world. I'm so proud of our staff and what they do. We have entomologists, we have engineers, we have marketing staff, we have admin, we have animal technicians, we have production and processing technicians, we have quality experts. Last year, our payroll was $1.8 million into the town of Yellow Springs, into the village. We paid over $300,000 for utilities in this town, and over $17,000 in direct Yellow Springs taxes. As we opened that commercial facility, I know there were concerns that we were planning on leaving, but in fact, our plans were to completely refocus this facility into exclusively research and development and continue to develop our business model so that we can continue to be the leaders in sustainable insect production and animal nutrition worldwide. We continue in that path, but as we have been informed, we will be leaving effective December 2021 when our lease is up. So I just want to make sure that folks are aware. We had no intentions of leaving. We had intentions of repurposing facilities for research and development, and now we'll be taking our 22 employees with benefits to a new location to focus on those opportunities. Thank you.
Hi there. I'm Alex Milliman. I live on 205 North Walnut, so I am adjacent. And I definitely understand a lot of the trepidations about potential growth issues. And a keyword, traffic, to me, makes me think of two things. Traffic is what we all think of as just the bad consequence of cars being where you don't want them, but it also is a very good word for businesses who want traffic. That is where the money comes from that goes to a lot of the businesses that are there and will be there. I think a lot of the water issues begin much further uphill, and so that is definitely an issue where I live, and carrying into the CVE. I mean the that industrial area Millworks. So I could definitely see some improvements already being necessary for Walnut, and that there's maybe a synergistic solution with parking and water management. So Walnut already needs work, but my hope, I guess, for the transition would be that the current renters that want to be there can be listened to, and otherwise, I think this town really could use more space that's fun, that is active in the evening. We're kind of boxed in, and so there is no expansion for downtown nightlife activities in the downtown, barring destruction of other properties in other directions. We have a good, nearly empty industrial zone on the edge of town, which might be appropriate for other industrial uses. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amy Magnus. I'm bringing the Children's Science Center idea to this plan. It's very important to me to be a good neighbor and to be a good friend. And so I'm listening very intently to the conversation that is happening here today. And I want to be part of a good solution. One thing that I want Colton to know particularly is that it's extremely important to me to see this town with the potential for growth. I see the Children's Science Castle as not just educating our very youngest, but all of us in our potential. I have been an active participant in the startup community of the region for a good 10 years now, and I've been looking for a site for the Science Castle. And I've heard from any number of young children who have gone through our school systems, who've gone to Antioch College, that there are very little resources for them, particularly in the winter. And I feel that this particular offering would provide us influx for opportunities for our own children, as well as visitors to the town. I really value the lots of little that's going on here. One of the things that I do, if you'll indulge me, is that I am the Winter Farmers Market manager, and I constantly have to recruit new vendors to participate. What I see myself being is, if you guys know Fairborn Spark, they're using games right now to help prove the value of Spark. And one of my vendors from the Winter Farmers Market was their anchor, Amber Tipton. She got an audience here in Yellow Springs and has greatly expanded that. And they are very grateful for all that she brought to that food incubator in Fairborn. And we are looking very specifically at Spark as, I am looking very specifically at Spark as inspiration for what we bring. It's very important that businesses grow, and they have to grow someplace, right? And so it's important, it's important to keep seeding that we have more things to grow and develop.
Thank you.
My name is Michaela Ducote. I live on 68 right outside of town, but I have a question and a follow-up comment. What is the open container policy for this area? Say if you were living or staying at the hostel and then were drinking at the brewery, for instance, would you be able to take an open container from one location to the other on these walkways? I think that's a good question because, as we all know, the Yellow Springs Police Department is already stretched incredibly thin. So if you're putting people in a situation where they are likely to commit this, albeit small, crime, then you're putting the police in a situation where it's kind of like, well, I know that people are doing this here. Should I go there and ask them not to do it or enforce the law that they should not? Or should I avoid this area as not to cause like a recurrent problem? You also have a hostel here. So you're either asking police to constantly be there or putting them in a situation where it's not necessarily doable for them to constantly be there. So I think open containers in general is a good thing to think about for this location. That's all.
Can I speak?
Yes.
My name's Sam Eckenrode. I'm a local realtor and a business owner. My late husband and I own Sam and Eddie's Open Books in Kings Yard. And I grew up in Yellow Springs. I went to the Antioch School. I went to Antioch College. I've come and gone many times. And I've witnessed a lot of divisiveness or polarization or I guess a tendency not to look for the win-win sometimes. And so I would like to encourage you to help everybody involved look for the win-win. And I know that's difficult, but I think it's really important because I think change happens, whether we like it or not. We can be reactive or we can be proactive. And I think if we want progress, we have to be progressive and we have to figure out ways that we can work together so that we can find the win-wins. That's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm Brittany Baum. I have a place on Fairfield Pike, and I'm also a soon-to-be business owner. I've spent 3 years on the Art and Cultural Commission, and I've gotten to know a lot of the rules and village values, and I just want to encourage you to not only look for the win-win like Sam mentioned, but also look back at your village values and our goals and see if this new plan helps to produce or answer some of the goals that we're looking for. Thank you.
Brittany. Oh, did you already speak?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you all very much for speaking. All right. Now we're Yes, so we're going to close the public hearing. Again, thank you all for your participation. And now, yes, we turn to considering the process. I know there were a number of questions that got asked by members of the public. And so if any of the owners or architect would like to try to address any of those questions that got raised, might be a good opportunity to do that.
I think they're discussing it right now.
Okay. Discussing what?
Questions that were raised.
Okay. wait for that? or- Okay.
He's going to go and get it and see if they're.
We're just asking if you wanted to address any of the questions that got raised during the public comments.
My name is Jessica Yamamoto, and I would like to address a few of the things that were said this evening. Several businesses have inquired, several people have inquired about starting businesses at Millworks. And I wasn't going to make an announcement, but Carrie of S&G Distillery has already made one. So, there is a craft distillery that is interested in producing. That space that is not attached to where the current S&G Distillery is located is what the hope and plans are for that. The other thing is that when we first purchased Millworks back in September, we notified all of the tenants that we are the new owners and that we wanted to meet with them and see what their plans were for the future. EnviroFlight did not engage in that conversation. They didn't address it for over a month, whereas the brewery, the distillery, or S&G Distillery, and the artists that are currently there, they all expressed that they wanted to renew their leases for a certain amount of time. And so that lack of discussion from EnviroFlight is why we are where we're at right now. And so, let's see, is there anything else? Open containers. So the liquor laws will prevent people from walking around with open containers. As it is right now, the rule is that people need to stay within the contained space. If they're outside, they have to be in a fenced space. So there will not be open containers on Millworks property. As far as the liquor laws go, those will govern where the liquor is allowed to be and where it isn't. And for the most part, it will only be allowed in the approved space for the brewery. And while S&G Distillery is still part of the Millworks property, it will be allowed in the tasting room and nowhere else. Are there any questions?
There was one question about the parking, the flow of the parking. Someone.
Yeah, the parking flow from the north section of the lot.
All the way through.
All the way through.
Is there ease of access going from Walnut up through Fairfield and back?
And I see what the neighbor meant is not very clear, but can you just describe that a little bit more as far as Walnut Street and how people can, will there be a flow to go off of Fairfield Pike, or are they going to be what's on the 1 acre contained off of Fairfield and what's on this larger property only coming from Walnut, or how do you envision it?
Right now, it is a throughway. Each one of the turn lanes into another lane will be designed for a small truck, an emergency vehicle, and all the other things that we're required to have on a private drive. So, yeah, you'll be able to drive through. So a trash truck, for example, could come off Walnut, go through the development all the way onto Fairfield if they so choose. I'd like to clarify a couple other things if I can. In terms of a traffic study, I think that it's important to include in that the number of pedestrians that come from town and walk the bike path is significant to the brewery's clients. I think that that'll be continued. I can tell you, living on Railroad Street, I can count a constant flow of pedestrians that go from town to the brewery every weekend. It's amazing. In fact, if you've been to the brewery very many times, chances are if you're going downtown, you'll park in the Bryan Center or someplace else and literally walk to the brewery as opposed to drive there directly. As far as drainage goes, the drainage is coming off of the whole watershed that comes from Winter Street all the way down Pleasant and to the front door of the brewery. And that has been looked at nauseum by our group. We plan to try to come up with ways to deter that water collected intermittently down that parking lot and elsewhere, and then use bioswale materials and things like that in the back where it's going to be collected on the bike path so it's attractive and it doesn't dump off at the rates that it is doing now, even though we're going to add some asphalt. I think ultimately we're going to improve that situation quite a bit just by default of how it runs down into the facilities. The other thing I'll say relative to space is that this is a fluid process. We can't begin to negotiate with people that are interested in space until we know that we can accommodate their use. We can't discuss with them terms of a lease or extending leases for some of the tenants until we know what we can do to offer their expansion. So everything is in a purgatory in terms of being able to really define a lot of these numbers. And it's frustrating on our part, but we certainly can't spend a whole year negotiating leases that we can't go into contract with because we don't have approval. It's a legal thing. So, you know, there are a lot of people interested in a lot of space, and the things that we're showing on this concept plan are people that have showed interest that we want to be able to take further. And whether or not it's an existing tenant or whether or not it's somebody new, they're still there because of the interest. And then that's all I'll say.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions or concerns before we start?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do.
Yeah.
When I read through this, I pretty much thought it was a slam dunk. I recognize traffic as being probably the primary issue, but I have been impacted by what people have said. So Planning Commission cannot tell people to renew or not renew their lease. That is clearly outside of our purview. But when I think of creating a new PUD that is going to be largely business, not only business, but largely business, I think of increasing businesses. I never thought that there would be two businesses that would potentially be, I guess, kicked out. That may or may not be accurate, but that is of great concern to me. But as I said, that's not anything we can do at Planning Commission, but the idea of creating a PUD to increase business at the expense of some good businesses is very concerning to me. So that is a big concern. I also heard the concern about the removal of relatively inexpensive space for new businesses to develop. Now that is not, the new owners don't have that obligation clearly, but that is something important for Yellow Springs, I think, to be able to have space, and usually that means buildings, not just empty ground. Traffic clearly is an impact. I think some of the other things, I'm convinced that the drainage would be cared for. Crime, I think there would be security. But I am concerned, I guess I would say basically that this in a way is could be seen as gentrifying this space now, which is sort of low scale, at the expense of some people who are employed there. And that is of concern. I'm done.
Yep.
I'm just sitting here.
I have a question for the applicants. The use of B1 and I1, is that pretty much what you are agreeing to as the type of businesses that can go in there? So you do have that flexibility. You're familiar with the types of businesses that are allowed in a mixed-use industrial, and coupled with what you could be allowed to have in Business 1. So you're comfortable with those two districts?
The only thing that we would not have would be straight retail.
Yeah.
Only makers could sell things that they produce. They would not be able to sell things that, or resell things that they purchased.
Would you guys have any consideration, compromise with Mr. McClendon about his property that he with the L, that he backs up on you guys? With compromising on a fencing if need be, if live fencing, any kind of thing like that? Is there open possibilities for that? Yeah, is there open possibility for that? Something that you could work with them?
Building a living
Okay.
fence.
We are starting to have discussions with Roger Beal about all of the fencing between the Hudson property and around the McClendon property. And we're looking at ways to do it as a living fence or a piece of art, but something that really fits into the culture of what we're looking at, not just a board fence.
Other questions, comments before we move into the details?
I think, yeah, one other question.
Okay.
And it's just food for thought. When we're going out to Fairfield, is it possible to make it just because you said two ways, it's a lot of traffic going up and down there, to make it just an exit only? Is that something feasible, or is it thought about? Would it work if it was just an out route? Just throwing it out there. Don't know if that's right, wrong, or indifferent. Just to alleviate some of that traffic.
The hostel is going to have a Fairfield address. So when somebody Googles to find the hostel, they're going to literally come down Fairfield, find it on Fairfield, and go in that way. There isn't really a way to get a turnaround, so thinking out loud, if we had the parking spaces in front of the hostel that could egress out onto or enter from Fairfield, there's a possibility that we could do the other two rows in a one-way from Millworks.
Big trucks.
Yeah, they would go from Walnut through. So that wouldn't have any impact. So we can look at that, yeah.
So that might also be something that a traffic study might help resolve for.
Well, I don't know what the traffic study is going to really say. I mean, I don't know what the result is going to matter, to be honest. I mean, we have parking ratios that are based on occupancy. They're not based on a lot of the other constraints, like, are you living there, are you staying there for 3 or 4 days and you park there? Do you live there, have a studio there, do you park there 24 hours? So all of these elements, and then you add in the hours of operation, the amount of foot traffic, pedestrian traffic, which we are really trying to highlight in this development, being very bike friendly. A lot of the people that go to the hostel will actually be bikers. So I'm not sure how to get down to the root of what that traffic study is supposed to do and how it's going to be looked at because of all of these different elements. I guess we could put that in there, but
Yeah, and I think staff would probably want to do something with that as far as have that in there in terms of even just looking at, you know, Mr. Hudson made some suggestions about starting at Dayton Street and coming up Walnut. You know, part of this traffic study, you know, could look at, are there some things that the village could do by not having parking on one side of the street? There's a lot of factors, I think, that would make it a benefit.
Any other questions? Thank you. Okay. So, I guess now, go back to the beginning, go through the PUD requirements that we have to decide on, which starts at section 1254.02.
Do you want to go through this in serial order? Do you want to only discuss those items which Denise has sort of pre-vetted and stated that she believes meet the criteria? How do you want to proceed on that?
Go through it from beginning to end, but maybe try to tighten up the process in places where we can, and then sort of step by step. Does that make sense? So sort of starting with 1254.02.
Okay.
Would you mind just if I read out loud the 1254.01, the PUD purpose statement? Which I'm not sure people have this available to them or not. It's just the planned unit development PUD district is established as an optional development tool to permit flexibility in the regulation of land development, to encourage innovation in land use, form of ownership, and variety of design, layout, and type of structures constructed, to achieve economy and efficiency in the use of land, to preserve significant natural, historical, and architectural features in open space, to promote efficient provision of public services and utilities, to minimize adverse traffic impacts, to better housing, employment, and business opportunities particularly suited to residents, to encourage development of convenient recreational facilities, and to encourage the use and improvement of existing sites when the uniform regulations contained in other zoning districts alone do not provide adequate protection and safeguards for the property and surrounding areas. It is the further intent of the PUD regulations to promote a higher quality of development than can be achieved from conventional zoning requirements in furtherance of the vision and goals of the adopted comprehensive plan and vision, Yellow Springs and Miami Township. So, wanted to read that into the record. So early on when we had the staff report, she sort of went through the different qualifications that have to be met by the Planning Commission. And so we're going to start. The first one is section 1254.02, qualifying conditions. In order to qualify for PUD approval, the project must satisfy the conditions of this section. It's the applicant's ability to demonstrate in writing that each of the following criteria is or will be met by the proposed PUD. And that includes, let's say, the recognizable benefits.
Which had to have at least three.
Right.
Three of the.
At least three of the
Out
benefits
of
shall be
8.
accrued, 3 of the 8. Now, staff, if I jump down to the staff recommendation of the staff review, which is on page 4, remember she said that the staff said that it met 2, 3, 4, 6, and 8, is that right? Yeah. So we could go through all 8 one at a time, or we could first ask the question in the interest of maybe moving the process along. Do we agree that it meets, let's say, 3 of the 8? And if we agree that it meets 3 of the 8, then we can just include that
Move
one.
on. Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
But we have
But
to agree
I
that
would-
it has to
right.
be the same three.
I would suggest that you identify which
Yes.
one
Which
is
one.
done for the
If you
record.
agreed with the staff
That way, if there's some dispute, when they can get the plan, the council,
Okay.
they've got a record.
okay. You agree with the staff recommendation that it meets, what are they? They were
2, 3, 4.
2, 3,
2,
4,
3,
6,
4, 6, and 8. So complementary mix of land uses, extensive open space and recreational amenities, connectivity of open space with new and existing adjacent greenway and trail corridors, improvement to public streets and other public facilities that mitigate traffic and other development impacts. And you said 8, is that the last one?
A demolition of that
Yeah,
blighted
removal or
building,
renovation of
blighted
blighted
building.
building sites or contamination cleanup. You agree with all of those? You know, I guess I would have questions about 6. The improvements to public streets or public facilities that mitigate traffic and/or developmental impacts. I'm not convinced of that one at this point.
Well, that was with the improvement to the bioswales by the bike path that were proposed. That would be an improvement to the public.
Lovely. Street?
Well, this is talking about traffic though, number 6.
Well, or other development
Or
impacts.
other development.
It's either
Okay.
or.
Just as it would be an improvement to the bike trail.
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
all. That's not necessarily.
Other comments on?
Well, please define, I'm not convinced that it removes blighted buildings or contaminated, cleans up contamination. What are
There
the
is an
blighted?
existing building that they're going to demo.
And is it, what, it's.
It's up in the section for the hostel.
It meets the definition of blighted, whatever that is?
It's a demo. In the other PUD, there weren't any buildings that were on the property, so, but.
Right, I
but
remember
this-
that.
Yeah, but this actually does have a building that's, and
But is it what's the definition of a blighted building? I mean, I agree there are 3, so that's not a problem.
Yeah.
But I'm just not convinced that 8 is, that it meets 8, number 8. But I do agree with the other one.
So we all agree on 2, 3, 4,
And
6.
6.
Yes. And I also would like to state, I think, as I have said before, I think preservation of small-town appeal is a meaningless statement that means almost anything you want to, so, but I'll give it to them.
We have a suggestion from the solicitor down at this
Okay.
end that you could do, maybe save some time by voting to adopt the staff recommendation with the exception of number 8, to which you have some objection.
Good.
Somebody want to make that motion?
I make that motion.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the staff recommendation, which ones it meets with the exception of number 8.
2, 3, 4, and 6.
2, 3,
You
4, 6.
want to call the roll on that vote, please?
I do. McQueen.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Pilata.
Yes.
Doden.
Yes. Okay, that gets us to, let's see, is it 1254.02B, size, which in your packets is on page 4. Each PUD shall contain a minimum of 5 acres, but this one doesn't. And then it gives 4 conditions, is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
One is by rezoning to PUD, is it going to result in an adverse effect?
Right. So
One, which is-
no adverse effect, has to complement the area. The purpose of the PUD can be achieved, and that it's not circumventing, it's not using this process to just circumvent zoning code. Comments or concerns on any of those?
Where are we?
We're at the bottom of page 4. Yeah.
Okay,
It
but,
has to, if we're going to approve something that's under 5 acres, it has to meet all 4 of those.
so, Could we move to the staff recommendation? for-
You know, number 4 is kind of, everything seems to, I mean, we have that in our, in our variance hearings, and it's like,
No,
you're hearing a variance because you know.
I'm thinking
you're
about
going-
number 1, will
Okay.
not result in significant
Yeah,
adverse.
no, I
Wh-
don't.
what did you?
Rezoning it to PUD is not gonna result in a significant adverse effect, no. I don't feel it is.
Upon nearby or adjacent village lands.
Oh. Like I said, what's surrounding it right now, even though it is residential, is industrial. It's industrial anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that it has to be balanced, because if someone lives by what's zoned industrial, they have to understand that. My
Yeah.
sense is there will be more traffic, though, so
Yeah.
one could say that's an adverse effect.
Yeah.
Questions about 2, 3, or 4?
No.
Nope.
Do we want to agree with the staff recommendation that all 4 of those are met?
I have very definite concerns about the traffic, and I would want to be able to have some qualifying, and I don't know if a traffic study will have.
And that's gonna come later in this.
Okay. No.
So.
Okay.
it's-
Just this part.
It doesn't really apply to size, but
Okay.
it will come later.
Okay, I got it.
We're moving ahead.
Do we need to vote on
You
this
need,
one as
you
well?
need a
then?
motion.
Well, where is this summarized, such that?
Well,
you
they're
can
sort of
make-
summarized one at a time, starting at the bottom of page 4.
It's under B.
B size 1.
Yeah, I do see it, but I think that is too broad. I think that
Okay.
you need to take each one and vote on each number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, yes or no.
Okay, we'll do that then. So under B1 is rezoning the area to PUD will not result in a significant adverse effect upon nearby or adjacent village lands.
And shall I simply call the
Yeah.
roll on each one as we
Let's do
go?
that.
Yeah, well, any discussion on that one?
No.
Okay, yeah, so just call the roll.
Okay.
Or,
Well,
and how, what does our vote mean?
Good point. Motion.
Are we
Go ahead
agreeing?
and go ahead and make a motion that it will not, if you want to do that. I would keep it as it is stated. It will not result in. So an affirmative vote says, yes, it will not
Okay.
result in.
So, okay, so make a motion that it will not result, I move that
We agree.
we agree that it will not result in a significant adverse effect upon nearby or adjacent village lands. Second?
Second.
Okay. Now, please call the roll.
Indeed. Paletta,
Yes.
McQueen,
No.
Williams,
Yes.
Doden.
Yes. Number 2. Go through the same process. The proposed uses will complement the character of the surrounding area. Discussion. The motion?
We have to move for each one of these?
Yes, on this part, yes.
Yeah.
I move that we vote on number 2.
That it will complement the character of the surrounding.
I don't think you have to move for each one, I think you just take the vote.
You just need to vote on each one?
Yes.
Okay. Just voting
Okay.
then,
Okay.
that it will complement the character of the surrounding area. Williams?
Yes.
Paletta?
Yes.
McQueen?
Yes.
Doden?
Yes. Number 3, the purpose and qualifying conditions of the PUD district can be achieved within the smaller area.
Then a smaller area. That's why I was
Within-
confused
Yeah, you're
about
right.
this.
Yeah, that's,
Oh,
you're right, Marianne,
so
that
it should
is
be the
confusing.
instead of Is that what you mean?
Yeah, if it's within the smaller area that they would like, that's under 5 acres, right? Instead of A. So it looks like it reads, could this be accomplished in a smaller area?
Oh,
Uh-huh, right.
so it's probably
That
Smaller,
does make
smaller
sense.
than
Say
5,
the.
smaller than 5 acres, yeah.
Another error in the zoning code.
Well, no, that
That's-
is what, I think that is what it's saying. If
Right.
you look at the homing issue, for example, you were wrestling with, can this in fact be achieved
In a
on the
different-
smaller sized area? And I think this is asking the very same thing. Can what they are proposing be achieved on this smaller than 5 acre parcel.
But, yeah. Well, but I think it's this, the ambiguity of the way it's
Yes, it
phrased
is.
right
Right.
now. It makes it sound like, could we do it on an even smaller
Yes.
scale?
Right,
You know,
exactly.
you know, I think that's the problem with one.
It's like, you can do
so-
it smaller than it is,
So
right?
that probably needs to be
within a
rephrased.
Right.
similar,
Yeah,
I
that would,
thought they
that would
were,
make more sense, yeah.
So we're clear.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll vote yes, that we think the purpose and qualifying conditions can be achieved on this.
Less than
This.
5 acres.
On less than 5 acres.
Right.
Huh?
All right, Williams.
Yes.
Doden.
Yes.
McQueen.
yes,
Palat.
Yes.
Then number 4, the PUD is not being used as a means to circumvent conventional zoning requirements. Questions or comments on that one?
Okay, so yes, it is not. McQueen.
yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Palata.
Yes.
Doden.
Yes. That gets us
Now you're down to
to
utilities.
utilities, C, at the bottom of page 5. And basically that the PUD shall be served by public water and sanitary sewer, and that's been confirmed by village staff. We need to vote on that.
I think if you could bundle any of them going down,
Okay.
because clearly when you get
So
to H, and you talk
utilities,
about traffic, that will be a discussion.
So shall we bundle C, D, ownership,
C and D.
where that's clear?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
We want to bundle E in there, consistent, so maybe we talk about E separately. Why don't we bundle C and D together?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we agree with C as far as utilities and that the ownership is clear enough? Yes?
Yes, you do. McQueen.
Yes.
Palata.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Doden.
Yes. So that gets us to E, which is comprehensive plan and vision, the proposed, on page 6. The proposed uses and design of the PUD shall be substantially consistent with the village's adopted comprehensive plan and the principles for land stewardship contained in the vision. Yellow Springs and Miami Township.
Okay, I'll go ahead and call it. Palata.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Doden.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Now we are on F, pedestrian accommodation. The PUD shall provide for integrated, safe, and abundant pedestrian and bicycle access and movement within the PUD and 2 adjacent properties. In addition to the concerns that I have, I know for traffic, and even as far as just what Ted was talking about earlier about living on Railroad Street and seeing how much pedestrian traffic already goes between downtown, I'm concerned about even more
Safety.
pedestrian traffic on that stretch of the bike path. And so, but I think maybe later on when we're putting, if we're thinking about modifications or conditions, that might be the place for
Yes.
a study for that, but I do have a concern about that.
The,
I think it can be accomplished, but I worry about that.
yeah. Okay.
Other thoughts? So, yes, the PUD shall provide for integrated, safe, and abundant pedestrian and bicycle access.
Yeah.
Okay, Williams.
Yes.
Palata.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Yes.
And I want to go, so we can still put some conditions on
Yeah,
that.
I
Yeah,
wrote it down,
condition at a later,
conditions
yep.
for pedestrian
Okay.
safety, yeah.
Okay, and that gets us to architecture. Building forms, relationship, scale, and style shall be harmonious and visually integrated.
Simple.
Yes?
Yes.
It's, well, all right.
Yep.
They're already there.
Palata.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Doden.
Yes. Then we come to traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah. H, which is traffic. The PUD shall provide for safe and efficient vehicular movement within, into, and out of the PUD site. Traffic calming techniques, parking lot landscaping, other sustainable design solutions shall be employed to improve traffic circulation, stormwater management, pedestrian safety, and aesthetic appeal. And obviously, from a lot of public comment and a lot of comments that we've had up here, there's obviously a concern about traffic flow, not only within the PUD, but mainly getting
Getting to
into,
it,
getting
yeah.
away from it. Comments, thoughts before we vote?
Yeah,
please?
I mean, can you vote on that with that condition?
That's the way we can vote on it, because
Yeah.
otherwise we're not going to vote on it. I mean, we need a
Right,
condition
so
on
with
it.
the condition of it, I mean, because staff, my recommendation was a traffic impact study as well as a safety study of pedestrians moving within the complex.
Well, I mean, we might want more than a study. I mean, we might want to
Well,
have,
but with that study, we'll get recommendations out of that study, which we can then apply to the final plan. So there may be, you know, suggestions by the independent consultant that says you should do this or that, and then we can just
Get
do
to that
that
point.
as a condition of the final plan.
I have a question, though. So if you approve the underlay as a B1 and I1, previously it was I1 in that area, you can assume more industrial use, less foot traffic, less constant in and out. But now you add to that a B1, then that brings some impact upon infrastructure. My question is, how much of that is the village itself responsible for? If in fact you approve a B1 underlay, how much is the village responsible to, for example, put in sidewalks that connect those, widen that roadway, put up a traffic light? That is the question I have, if in fact you approve the B1 underlay, because certainly within the PUD, the owners are responsible for all of that.
Yeah.
External too, it's not as clear, and I
And
know
that's
that
where a
those
lot of the
conditions
impact
can
is
be,
gonna be.
can be added or asked about, but once you say, yep, B1 is cool,
Yeah.
that's the question I have.
related to that, how can you have two zones within a PUD? There's no problem with that?
No.
You can have as many zones as you want, and they're just all overlaid in there?
Or we're making a hybrid. Is that what, so we're kind of making a hybrid, is that what we're doing,
Mhm.
essentially? For lack of better words? Where'd Ted go?
Right there, yeah, I was looking for it
Right.
too.
Right, it's a hybrid?
Yeah.
Okay.
What a PUD is, really. But, you know, and to clarify something, our first attempt was to do this as change it to a B1. And because of the rules on spot zoning, it was determined that B1 is illegal, or spot zoning is illegal, and our only recourse was PUD. You know, I think that my understanding of what the comprehensive plan is trying to do is to get us to rethink what the B1 district is, and how far can that extend, and how does that new use change the dynamics of everything that is now I1 into B1. And I think that that would be the prudent thing to do, but it isn't on us on this application.
Still on H. Is this the place to impose?
Well, given the question, I think that when you look at that site plan, there isn't any question, but what they have provided for, that's the safe flow of traffic and pedestrians within the PUD, which is kind of why I brought up the.
It also says into and out of.
Within, yeah.
And there's
within.
ingress and egress.
Right,
Yeah.
so it is,
But then
do
your
they have
issue is
safe ingress and
the
egress?
connecting streets, which are the
And is it
responsibility of the
safe
village.
inside the PUD, yeah.
That's the question.
I haven't heard the planning commission definitively articulate its concerns, and through that articulation, then you can determine what the conditions you would like to place on that, so that the information that you think is necessary for the project to move forward is in the record.
Well, I have concerns that there will be more traffic, vehicular traffic on Walnut Street, more vehicular traffic on Fairfield, which is fairly dangerous because there are no sidewalks and because of the bridge. And I agree that increased pedestrian traffic on the bikeway with bikes going through is also a problem. So those would be the traffic things that I'm concerned about.
So are those the conditions that we put on it then?
I don't know how to put
But
the
that's-
conditions
that's-
on it.
that's- I mean, is that-
So now you've
Stating your
articulated concerns.
Okay.
And so now the question is, how can information be obtained to address those concerns?
So by the
Do we
traffic
do that?
study with those conditions, or with those questions?
Correct.
With the traffic
What-
study?
what-
Can we
what-
get a traffic study with those
To get the
questions?
answers to those questions.
And do we
Or
do
to
that
address
when
those
we're-
concerns.
When we're doing the modifications or recommendations at the end?
I think that's a process issue. You could do it now if
You
you're
can
ready
do
to
it now, yeah, I mean, might as well just put
Okay.
it.
So basically, have to put together a motion to accept this with
Yes.
study to.
Traffic and safety. Traffic and pedestrian
Traffic and
safety study.
pedestrian safety.
Into and out of.
Into and out.
Well, you know, not to be a complete
Into, out of,
stickler
and
again,
within, as it
but-
says.
so then the question is, the traffic study comes back and says, yeah, it would be all dandy if you had a sidewalk that went the entire length. Now, who is responsible for that? And is that a condition that you now say, if the traffic study comes back and indicates a need for infrastructure development of sidewalk or road widening, do we ask whether or not the developers are interested in
I think
assisting
that
in
would be
some
a
of that?
condition.
Yes.
That I'd
Of
want
the
to see.
final plan.
Yes.
On the final plan, right.
So
Yeah, we're being kind of ambiguous.
you're a little ambiguous.
Yeah. We need to figure out what we are asking for. Other than do a traffic study and see how much traffic's going to be increased.
Well, I think we
But
want to
what-
be assured that there's safety in the traffic on Walnut Street, on Fairfield, for vehicles and people and walking and bikes. And if it's not, we want to know what are the options that can be done about it, and we want those options, whatever options there are that the developers will agree to do those things, whether it's building a sidewalk or putting in
But-
signs or doing less development so that there's less.
But if
traffic.
you've already said yes,
Right.
you can have B1, I1, yes, you can do that. You accept some responsibility for infrastructure development at that point. I think, I mean, does it make sense to ask the developers, do you have a willingness to come back to the table and discuss at the, end of a traffic study, what percentage of, or whether you would be willing to
Contribute
contribute?
to.
Like, because otherwise, I don't see how you get any clear answer on this. One
Right.
is village, one is PUD.
So maybe it'd be better to put this as a condition of our recommendation to council, that this is something that council needs to think about carefully.
We're passing it off. Don't pass
Yeah,
it
well,
off, don't pass it off. We're not
Hot
passing
pass
it
it
off.
It already is. I mean,
We're not
everything,
passing it off.
but everything you're doing tonight is going to council.
How long,
We
how
can give
long
them guidance.
We could-
Yeah, we can give them some guidance, and they could choose.
We could-
to stay ahead with our guidance.
concern.
Well, very much so.
Ted, how long would it take to get a study of the nature they're
But
talking
the
about?
village should do the study.
Yeah.
But I mean, just whether the village does, I mean, somebody's going to have to be asked to do it. How long do we think it would
It's
take?
a time relative thing because you have to run that counter, and I don't know how you do the bike path, but on the road, you have to do the counter for periods of time to do, and so realistically, it should be done for a year because June during street fair gets a whole lot different count
Right.
than February when there's 8 inches of snow and ice on the ground, right? So what does that mean? I don't know. I don't know how to address that issue from a design perspective. I don't.
Because we would need it in the summertime on a Saturday night or something, so.
Yeah, I mean, and
I mean,
then
Saturday's gonna be your worst case scenario, yeah.
Is it relevant to what other things are going on in town? During Springfest, when there are a whole lot more people walking on the bike path because they want to go to the brewery, should my clients be punished because there's an event in town? If there's the fireworks, I mean, there is no control over once you adopt a use, a brewery, distillery, a restaurant, whatever they are, and you invite people,
I think
It
you
is what
should
it
be
is.
standing at the mic, and you should be,
now,
well, one way to reduce traffic would be to reduce there's a lot going on there, and one way to reduce traffic would be to not have so much in the space.
but we did eliminate the flex space, which was by far the highest immediate traffic count that we had. The brewery is pretty constant, but the flex space was way up there. We took that off the table because of comments from the citizens and things that we had. So that was, we felt that that was probably too heavy. So we reduced a dramatic amount of traffic and parking count that would come immediately in a car. So we've already conceded some.
So, where are we?
Well, we're still on H. Yeah. Traffic. Suggestions. Go ahead and vote on it as stated.
Well, I mean, the fact is that whatever you do, it's going to council.
Yeah.
And you can make the recommendation so that council knows what you were thinking.
Okay.
And what that vote was, and what your concerns are so that they're aware of it.
So-
And meanwhile, that would give the applicant an opportunity to perhaps address it when they go in front of council. There's not gonna be time to have a sufficient study done to, can you hear me? Do I need to be on this? Sufficient to have a study done, but.
For the
you're
prelim.
For the prelim, but, the process is still moving along and more
Right.
information can be obtained. I mean, let's face it, this process has never been intended to have a final, complete, etched in stone plan going forward.
Well, I'm reading that sentences. It says, "The PUD shall provide for safe, efficient vehicular movement," blah, blah, blah. Basically, I'm reading it as though it is directing the developers of the PUD to do that. So
Inside or outside of the PUD?
both. It says within,
It says
into and out of.
But is that
But once
just,
they're
is that just
out-
ingress egress?
Well,
yeah.
Is that what that
Yeah.
means?
Yeah.
It doesn't
That's what that
say,
means.
it
They
says
don't have
safe
to-
and
they don't have to
efficient.
make
I mean,
the streets safe.
I
It doesn't
think
say-
they need to show that they're doing that.
Well, they would be showing us that with having ingress and egress and the parking spots added and calming techniques within the PUD.
Right.
So it really, how far out of the PUD
Right, that
do
we
we
can't-
go? Because they're saying we're going to have safe aprons that are ingress and egress from our PUD
And we don't
to
care
the
what
public
happens
street.
once they're out.
No, we
No, we
do,
do.
we do,
No,
but
I
that's
know we
not,
do.
that's
That's
not
what you
what
do that
we-
with every-
not what
But-
this is addressing.
But that's not
Right.
what this is addressing.
That's, yeah.
I
No,
don't
and they
buy that.
can't bring a backhoe in and widen our streets.
Right,
I mean,
right.
it's-
Okay. Well, let's vote on
And
H.
the other issue is that this is an existing facility that has traffic. Some of the industrial use, maybe not as much, but permitted industrial uses within that complex can in fact increase traffic significantly. So if this person who purchased this property as an investment property, and they are restricted to what they can do with these buildings based on a traffic study or based on traffic comments, then we're looking at taking buildings down, not rehabilitating some or restricting their use, which makes this a financial burden, which probably puts this thing down.
Right.
Forget it. I mean, if they can't bring patrons in to play and work here based on a number of cars or traffic allowed, that's a real problem.
I don't think
I don't
anyone is
think
saying
no
that.
one's
I think
saying
we
that.
want to make sure
No
that
one's
it's
saying
safe.
Well,
And
okay.
that's a reasonable thing.
Would it make sense to get
I think
us-
it's just deciding what is your responsibility within the PUD, and what is the village's responsibility? We're just trying to clarify that.
And that one part of that can also be addressed through an updated staff report.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think that there's a
Yeah.
blend of things, but the question then is, do you want to either request the applicant to delay this, or do you want to move forward with the recommendation?
So upon an updated staff report with these conditions, we can vote on this with what it's stated.
Well, look, let me throw this out for consideration. And sorry I keep making the comparison, but I think it works. When you looked at the homing PUD, it was needed to understand whether the village would need to contribute to the infrastructure with regard to the sewer water. So perhaps that's contemplated here in terms of a staff report that comes back and says, Public Works Director states that to put in sidewalks this length of the street, to, work with the county to widen this roadway would cost X amount of money, and then let council decide whether they have an appetite to add to the infrastructure to support the development.
Because that's where those decisions.
Because if you
made.
say yes, B1 and I1, I think you're saying we agree to improve the infrastructures to make this PUD safe.
But their agreement isn't binding on the village because
Right.
council has final say.
Right.
What they're-
No.
So to say, if it comes out of the planning commission, says we need additional information from staff, so that council has that information, again, there's nothing binding about it. It's saying, we need more information.
Yes, what I'm saying.
Yeah. Right.
But that is the information we need.
Right.
Yes.
Saying the same thing a different way.
And I would also add one thing, that presently, we have a gravel driveway that is unsafe. And our clients are willing to invest a whole lot of money in asphalting and striping this driveway and making it safe for everybody within this development. Sidewalks aren't really an issue, because people will walk the aisles of the cars anyway. But that,
Okay.
we noted that they've already done a lot to make it safer.
So does someone have an idea of how to frame the condition so that we can vote on it and
Well,
or
put the condition.
concerns?
So the general issue is that you believe a traffic and pedestrian study is something that you would like to see. In addition, you want to have the staff prepare an updated report on what the potential infrastructure cost to the village would be.
Yes.
Yes. So, yes. So if we vote yes on this.
Yes.
With those conditions.
Yes.
Okay.
I make a motion.
With the recommendation that council get that additional information before it.
Upon
Okay.
recommendation.
Did you get that
Yep.
down?
They're really good.
Ish.
Yes? Would you mind reading it to us?
So if you vote that yes, you agree that the traffic portion is correct, you attach the condition that a traffic and pedestrian study is conducted, and that an updated staff report, which includes potential infrastructure cost to make those safety improvements, be provided to council prior to their voting on the topic.
All right. Yeah. Second.
That's it. I
Okay.
like that.
You want to call the vote on that then? Thank you.
Williams.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Collada.
Yes.
Doden.
Yes. Oh, right. So thank you.
I feel like I need a shower now.
Now to I.
I, eligible districts. Land within any zoning district may qualify for PUD zoning. Vote on that, yes.
Yes.
Ready? Okay. Collada.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Doden.
Yes. Yeah, now we move on to the next section, 1254.03, which is at your top of page 8.
Let me lump that in. I know, I was just seeing if I could lump it in with anything else.
With A, all the permitted, all uses proposed are allowed,
Right, so
so,
any problems with,
no, okay. Minimum
A.
lot size and zoning requirements, staff determined that
We're good.
is,
Yep.
meets, okay. For
C is the
C,
connectivity?
yeah, C, connectivity. think they've shown that. I think that they've shown that by taking out the corridors connecting the buildings.
And D, we're now at the top of page 11, which is modification of minimum requirements. Again, with 8 subcategories, it says it must satisfy at least 4 of the following 8 categories. And I believe the village recommendation was that it met
3, 5, 7, and 8.
3, 5, 7, and 8.
Or 1, 2, no, 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8. Oh, 6, agree with, yeah, 3, 5, 7, and 8, yep. Yep, 3, 5, 7,
I
and 8.
would concur with staff, 3, 5, 7, 8.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. So on, and then the last one is that our E was a density bonus, which doesn't apply.
Didn't apply to it.
It didn't request it. And F is page 13 to 14 about open space, which,
What about the minimum requirements? Do we need to deal with that or not?
Yeah, it's gonna come at the end.
Okay.
The open space that met those requirements, I think
29%, they
probably,
need 15%.
So
So if we take all of
Bundle.
1254.03,
Yep.
Bundle it.
vote yes,
Yep.
that they met all those requirements. You want to call the roll on that for 1254.03? Is that okay if we vote on these all as a lump?
Bundle them up, yep.
Okay, so for approval of the entirety of chapter 1254.03, Pallotta,
Yes.
McQueen?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
okay. Now,
Right,
do we
gets
want
us-
to then go back to, after that number 8, with the criteria for modification of the minimum requirements that the owners, because they've met the requirements for the minimum, so they can ask now for modifications, and they want to remove the 30% of retail
You see
incidental.
where she is in the middle of page 12?
Well, and they want to allow for deviation in the number of parking spaces. However, as I mentioned, since I wrote that, they, with the flex space out, that does reduce it quite a bit. My calculation, it took it down to 234 spaces. Typically in B1, if you allow that 25% because of the walkability of the area, takes it down to 175, and they're asking 140 spaces plus 40 bike racks. And oftentimes, Planning Commission in the past has taken into consideration the bike racks as well. So do you want to make a recommendation to
And would
remove
we make the
of
recommendation
the
here,
retail
or-
for the whole PUD is what they're asking?
Right.
But didn't we want the occupancy on that or not? Is that what we were talking about? But how many people in the brewery relative to their space requirement?
Well, no.
Or was that not it?
30%, is that?
Well, you said that the requirement that was put on the brewery, as I understand it, when they opened the brewery, was that their taproom space could only be 30%
Right.
of their total space.
And
No,
they're
that
asking,
was-
Applies to the whole complex right now, and that's the language that we're thinking about removing.
and they wanted, and they, the brewery in particular asked it for unlimited. And I think we want to look at
Yeah, but they're
what does
also
unlimited
asking it
mean?
for all of the retail
Right.
because the artist studio, whereas it's their studio, and if it's, if it's 400 square feet, then they can only have 30%
Right.
for their selling. They aren't gonna wanna do that. I mean, I checked to make sure that this wasn't something that was at a higher level as far as the law on breweries and tap rooms. There isn't any, that was just a village.
Village
Addition.
condition at the time.
All right, that was my only concern, was the word unlimited, that's all I cared about, that's all, but
That's where it came
as long as we walk through that, I get it,
As
that
far
makes
as
sense.
precedent
Yeah.
setting,
Yeah,
I'm fine with both then.
I'm sorry.
I was okay. I think the parking, they're increasing parking by adding the stripes anyway, so if they're taking some away, that's okay.
So how do we want to handle those two concerns of removing the curb cut, allowing for deviation?
Denise, how's that reflected in your staff report? Let's see, you're making that recommendation, aren't you?
Well, they are.
They're asking.
They're asking
They're
for
asking
that,
for that.
removal of that.
I think you just reflect that you are recommending to council that the 30% retail incidental to manufacturing be removed.
I did not put that in the report because I still needed to look to make sure there wasn't some legal
Okay.
at state
Again,
level.
Would
and
that
there
be something
isn't.
maybe we should add
At this point in time.
at the end?
Yeah, I think that because we're going through requirements, that's an unrelated
Right, okay,
directly
so
to
we'll-
this process, but
I
yes.
have it on the list
Make
for
a
the-
note to go back to that.
Okay.
Okay. So that gets us then to $1254.04, is that right? Which is just a section on the general provisions. of the
And that's
PUD.
just how you are,
Right.
that really is just instructions for you as to how you look
Oh,
at stuff,
right.
yeah.
1254.05 just delineates
Just
the
how we-
process that we have to
that
go
you
through,
have
which
had.
what we're doing tonight is one of those steps. 1254.06, page 18.
So I want to double check, did everybody agree then with the
30%.
PUD requirements? I mean, was there a vote on that or something, or?
There was,
You mean
What we just went
into
30%?
the record?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that was done.
Okay.
I believe it was done. We've got on D, we had the 4.
Okay, they voted though that they agreed with that. I didn't
Yes,
hear that,
yes,
okay.
yes.
All right, okay.
Which gets us then up to 1254.06 on page 18, which is review standards. In considering the PUD request, the following body, or the reviewing body, must find that the proposed development meets all of the following general standards, and it lists standards A through G, and G has a bunch of sub-numbers underneath it. Would, council, would you recommend we vote on these one at a time?
Well, it depends. Denise, I don't see a recommendation
No.
in here. Okay. I think that in the short answer is yes. Go one at a time to discuss.
Okay, so we'll start with A. The PUD will comply with the standards, conditions, and requirements of this chapter. All who agreed, I guess I'll call the roll. Yes, if we agree.
Okay, Williams?
Yes.
McQueen?
Yes.
Doden?
Yes.
Palata?
yes.
B, the PUD will promote the intent and purpose of this chapter.
Okay, Williams?
Yes.
McQueen?
I'm having trouble with this one. Well, here,
Pass.
We can pass.
I'm going to say no.
Doden?
Yes.
Palata?
Yes.
C, the proposed project will be compatible with adjacent uses of land, the natural environment, and the capacities of public services and facilities affected by this proposed project.
Okay, Palata?
Yes.
Doden?
We need to discuss this.
I'm going to vote no.
McQueen?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
D, the proposed project will be consistent with the public health, safety, and welfare needs of the village.
Okay, McQueen?
Yes.
Williams?
No.
No. Doden? Paletta.
No.
E, granting the PUD rezoning will result in a recognizable and substantial benefit to the users of the project and to the community, which would not otherwise be feasible or achievable under conventional zoning districts.
Okay, Williams,
Yes.
Paletta,
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Doden.
Yes. Okay, F, the PUD will not result in a significant increase in the need for public services and facilities, and will not place a significant burden upon surrounding lands or the natural environment unless the resulting adverse effects are adequately provided for or mitigated by features of the PUD as approved.
Paletta.
I need some clarity on that.
Okay.
You want me to read it again? Or?
I just need clarity on it.
Yeah, just so,
Yeah, if we're gonna
Yeah.
run traffic into public services, basically.
Well, the as approved, I think, is where the conditions come into play pretty seriously. Because you aren't
Right.
going to approve it without your attached conditions.
Okay.
That, my interpretation,
I'm comfortable then.
okay?
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Doden.
Yes. G, the PUD will be consistent with the village's comprehensive plan and vision, Yellow Springs and Miami Township. Specifically, the following planning principles shall be adhered to as applicable, and they are, 1, redevelopment and infill. Do we need to go through these one at a time? Or just read through them and?
they don't all apply, so.
I think if you get consensus on what doesn't apply, and then
Okay.
maybe just try to see if you can do it collectively rather than one at a time.
Okay. Does everybody, because it seems like number 2 doesn't apply, the natural features and resources should be preserved. That doesn't apply.
I agree.
Can I clarify something on that real quick? I consider natural features and resources things like historic preservation. If something is on a historic register, it is in fact a natural resource because it's designated. In this case.
Might be historical, I don't know if it's natural.
Well, it's natural because it exists.
Okay, we don't,
Well,
Well, yeah,
this
and
is
I
not
think-
gonna
It's
make or
different.
break
It-
you.
Yeah, honestly,
Right, yeah.
yeah, with my interpretation, it had to do with preserved. And it's not, I understand that you're bringing it back maybe, but it wasn't preserved in the beginning, first place. That's where I was going with it.
And I also think there's a distinction between whether or not they determine something's not applicable.
Yeah.
Not applicable,
We're saying NA.
then NA, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Frank, were you saying that number 2 is not applicable?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want me to read them all, or?
I think 7's
I think the
not
number
applicable.
6 is kind of not really.
6, diverse housing choices are found throughout the village, including relatively high density and affordable units.
I didn't quite understand when it said throughout the village, what that meant.
7.
7, parks, open space, and recreational areas are incorporated into future development.
Not applicable.
8 is applicable, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you remove 2.
So,
6.
1, 3, 4, 5, and 8
Yes.
that apply.
So
Oh, yeah, right.
So those that you've determined that are applicable, then you could do that
Okay.
serially.
So the vote would be our conditions 1, 3, 4, 5, and 8 applicable to this development.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So a yes means yes, they are. Williams,
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Doden,
Yes.
Paletta.
Yes.
Then gets us to H.
H.
H. H, the PUD will respect or enhance the established or planned character, use, and intensity of development within the area of the village where it is to be located.
Ready?
Yeah? Everybody ready?
Williams? No, we're not. Ready?
Yes.
Balada?
Yes.
McQueen?
Yes.
Doden?
Yes.
So, I think if we wanted any express conditions which had to do with recommend, I think you're done, and now we talk about the 30% removal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the parking,
Right.
parking spaces.
Because our ultimately, the options that are described as far as what we can pass on to council is we either approve, disapprove, or approve with modifications.
And I will take you back to your vote
Right.
on, where you were a 2-2 split, that is a no vote, and you needed to approve each of those conditions, so you did not pass that.
And what section was that? 12?
Um,
125402.
It was 125406D.
D?
The proposed project will be consistent with the public health, safety, and welfare needs of the village.
You got it.
Page 18.
Got it, okay. And
That was the only one.
yes, you did not pass.
Which letter was it that didn't?
D.
have-
E,
D.
D.
And did it have to pass? Yes,
All.
Yes.
it has to pass all.
So, again, you can do as you previously did, which is say, we cannot recommend this because we did not pass all of the conditions, and we pass it on to council for their approval with the following conditions.
Mhm.
Same thing you did the last time.
That-
I'm good.
You weren't here for that.
No.
Yeah, because
They
technically
can,
we
their
can't
vote
approve
can
it.
supersede.
because-
Right,
your
we
vote,
can't
yeah.
approve it.
So what modifications or conditions do we want to pass on? There's obviously the language about the traffic study.
Yeah.
So the easiest one is that you recommend to council that
Yeah.
they disregard the 30%.
The 30%. Yeah.
Can I step back just
No,
because of
no,
my
no,
notes?
let's stay up here for right now.
And then you have the broad discussion about your safety concerns relative to traffic and pedestrian safety and cost of potential infrastructure to the village. So your recommendation seems to me is that you would like to have a better you would recommend that council get a better understanding of potential safety impact, and that whether or not a resolution to safety concerns, what financial impact that would cost to the village.
I have a question, Chris. I think at this point, my biggest concern is the impact that this has on two existing businesses apparently not being able to continue to stay there. Can we say anything about that, or do we just have to say that's out of our purview?
Well, I think that I interpreted your no vote on 125406D, that the proposed project will be consistent with public health, safety, and welfare needs of the village when you voted no, to be a reflection of that
That was, she
perspective.
didn't vote no on
I
that.
think there was
Well,
one that
I
you
voted
on.
no once or twice, and every time
Relating
I
to that, yeah.
Okay, it was
did,
comparable.
it was that, trying to weigh that concern against the benefits.
I think that to the extent that members of planning commission want to make that concern available to council.
Just noting the concern?
It can be, if that's a concern,
Yes, I
that it can
would
be
like to have
reflected
that
as a
concern.
body or in the minutes as an individual concern of a member.
Don't we have to do more research to find out what the concern is? I mean,
Well,
we
I
don't
think-
have further,
I'm-
we don't have
Well,
information on
I'm
it.
saying
If
what
it's
the
listed as
concern
it was
is.
for
I know
concern,
that
it's
I
in the
don't have all
minutes.
the information, but the other people sitting out there do, so they can deal with that.
Yeah, and hopefully they come to council as well
Yeah,
with the
I
same
think
concerns.
that concern will be made, will be
Because that was
put in the
news to me.
minutes, and I don't think it necessarily has to be a recommendation per se, as much as
No, I'm
it's
not-
made
yeah,
available.
okay.
Yeah.
It's known.
Right.
Okay.
Had you have a look?
Well, we're getting into, when you're talking about lease negotiations and you're talking about private matters in terms of a public discourse, I think that if you want to start down that road, it's going to get real ugly for a lot of people. That is not necessary.
Well,
And so I understand the concern, but if there is in fact somebody presenting something and we have information to counter that, we are going to pose that counter publicly. And
And that's within your right. What I would say is that at a higher level, for those policymakers who are part of that discussion, to me, it seems to me is an economic development discussion at a policy level, if that's something that people have an appetite to take up. But in terms of what this body's supposed to do, they're reflecting a concern that was addressed by citizens in the context of the public meeting, that at least some members of this body have concluded that that's a valid concern for council to be aware of, and that's all that's being done, I think, by way of this document,
And
this
within the
discussion.
language of how, of the purpose of a PUD, I think it's a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
So what have we got as far as,
I think that if you can agree that.
So what about the deviation of the number of parking spaces?
Okay, yeah, you didn't address, yes, okay, Park.
That we accept that?
Yeah.
except the deviation on the parking spaces?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got, you want council to know that you are recommending that the removal of the 30% limitation, that you are recommending to council that they approve a deviation on the number of parking spaces, and that you, go ahead.
And then because I did go through this with Johnny too, so the traffic and pedestrian safety analysis, a noise impact analysis, a stormwater management analysis, and an agreement regarding the 3 residential lofts as affordable rentals.
Okay, and then there was one other one that I think that Ted raised that was, it's not a point of contention, which would be the fencing screening issue.
Oh, yeah.
Called it a natural wall.
Living
A
wall.
living wall, okay, yes. Different than natural,
Different than a wood fence.
or natural screening.
Well, it works into trellises and
So
artwork.
we got these 3 things put in there as well.
It's a yellow.
Okay.
Well, do you want to actually say that you are asking for provision of a living wall, that you're asking for adequate mitigation?
Have a mitigation
Right.
of the neighbor's
For
concern
the neighbors, right.
for road pedestrians and noise. Have a version that you could read to us.
Maybe between myself and Denise? So you are actually probably not approving
No.
with the following conditions. So you're recommending removal of the 30% of retail condition. You're asking that the deviation to parking spaces be permitted. You are asking for a traffic and pedestrian safety study and for an assessment of the cost of that infrastructure to the village if those safety improvements are made. The loss of existing businesses will simply be reflected in the minutes and the
Right.
comments, okay? And that noise impact and stormwater analyses are completed, that assessment of the 3 lofts as permanently affordable is completed, and that adequate mitigation between residential and PUD areas be provided.
Very good, Judy.
And then it'll come to council, just like the last one, with where there was a yes, where there was a no, where there was a yes, no.
So overall, is it coming to council then as not being recommended?
I don't think that you can.
We can't, because we.
Because of that one piece, yes.
Because of that one piece.
Yeah.
Can you clarify for me again, because I'm missing it on my notes. What section was it where there was a no vote?
1254.06 D.
What page?
Page 18.
Okay.
That's where it was. There was a 2-2 vote, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that was your only 2-2 split. You had a couple of no votes scattered through there, but there was no other 2-2.
Yeah, I mean, can I make a comment about that? I mean, just for clarification. Regarding the adjacent uses of land, presently it is surrounded by industrial. And I don't understand how we can make an argument that we are not improved, the PUD does not, by including a B1, does not improve and is compatible with the I-1 around it.
Where are you?
I'm on C, 125406C.
No, it's D.
D
It's
is in dog.
D.
It's
Sorry.
D.
Well, I would argue that the client is going to improve the parking and improve the pedestrian access into the lot. And so I'm confused about, again, how that doesn't qualify.
Are we at the same spot?
I believe that the no vote was based on welfare, not on health and safety. Am I correct in that assessment?
I also think that is not fatal to the process that council's going to go through. And I think part of this is designed to allow an applicant to be able to address what the concerns are the planning commission has raised.
Understood.
All right. Any other?
Can I grovel before you that perhaps we put off these text amendments to
Be great.
another day?
Did you get a final motion and a vote on these?
We have
these
not yet,
conditions?
that's what I was
Yes.
just snooping for.
Jumped at you.
Yeah, would you mind reading it back to us again?
She's got it. No, she got it.
Okay.
I don't think you need to read it again.
You don't? You sure?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
So you.
Everybody satisfied
So the
with what
vote
you
is
heard?
on these conditions, is that,
Recommending that council consider these conditions.
Correct.
Right.
If they approve.
Yeah.
Did
You want
you
to call the roll?
discuss the noise?
It was raised there, yeah.
Well, Denise raised it. Did everybody agree that there should be a noise study?
I read it back.
You read it.
Read it back to us, yep.
Ready, people?
We're ready.
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Pallotta,
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Doughton.
Yes.
That concludes that part of the agenda.
Hopefully it includes the
Thank you all
meeting.
very much for your patience.
Can we take a 5-minute recess?
Well, I think there may be a motion to perhaps table the next portion of the agenda, given the hour.
Okay.
We're still,
I don't want to
no,
hear
we're
this
still
one.
rolling.
We're still
We're
meeting.
still rolling.
Okay, so our next item on our agenda, thank you all. Enjoy the weather.
I hope it's not snowing.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be
There's
snowing.
a chance.
This time, yeah.
I'd take a 2-hour delay from school tomorrow.
Don't even go there.
Oh,
Snowing?
I don't have
I
anything to
mean-
do with your school.
so you guys don't want to do the text amendments?
We can. I mean, we're all here, but we
How
could
long
also
do you
we could
think
also
doing
go
the text
home.
amendments
It's very hard to see what time it is.
It's
like
10 till 10.
Well, since we don't have a public hearing of anybody out there, it should go really fast.
I mean, because basically you just, you've shown us the language that's getting added.
It's
Regarding
only, yeah, we
utilities,
only,
and that's in
yeah,
the
we just,
underlined
we just
sections, right?
realized that the electric wasn't
Right.
as part of the major, we're
And
only
so,
inserting the
all of
electric.
that- Was the text amendments, are they all pretty clear to you guys?
Yes.
I read through them,
All right,
yeah.
do it. Yeah, the
I think we can do
planning,
the
All right,
text
let's
amendments
go.
pretty
yeah,
quickly.
all of them relate to the planning code. It was written based on Greene County, which does water and sewer. And we have an electric utility, so so in each of those 7 text amendments, we're just adding that into it. That's all that is.
And those were just the sections that were underlined in
Yeah.
each of them.
So then you will read off that section, you will open a public hearing, you will close a public hearing, there will be a vote.
Okay. So read, what do you read off that section?
That section, that particular ordinance.
Hang on.
You want me to do it?
Oh, would you mind?
No, I don't mind.
Okay.
Which one is the first one? So 122601 definitions, adding electric lines and transformers to
for
section
your
B. You open the public hearing.
Okay, open the public hearing. Hearing none. I'll
Did
close
you
the
do a
public
motion
hearing.
and then the public hearing?
No.
Okay,
Anyway, close the
Right.
public hearing.
okay.
Any discussion on that one?
No.
Okay, let's go on to, is it,
As a vote?
do we need to vote on one at a
Yes,
time?
yes.
Yes, you do.
You
Okay,
Godin,
so, yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Palata,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
Janelle.
Yes.
122603, contents of preliminary plats, adding existing electric poles and transformers within the track. And also plans of the proposed electric distribution system showing the location of transformers and lines.
Any discussion up here? Open the public hearing. Close the public hearing. Motion to approve it.
Second?
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
There we go.
122604, submission of an action on final plats, adding electric transformers and lines to that section.
Any discussion? Open the public hearing. Close the public hearing. Other questions?
Motion.
Motion to approve, second.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
122606, design standards, adding electric and underground electric distribution plan for the entire subdivision prepared by a licensed engineer at the expense of the subdivider shall be formally approved by a village designated engineer.
Any concerns, questions? Open the public hearing. Close the public hearing.
Motion?
Motion to approve. Made and
I
seconded.
move.
Second.
Second, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
122608, construction of public improvements, minimum requirements for materials and installation procedures for electric transformers and electric lines shall be in compliance with the Village of Yellow Springs Public Works Department.
I do want to talk about this.
No.
Any discussion? Open the public hearing. Close the public hearing. Motion to approve it.
Move.
Move, second.
Second.
I'm sorry, who did, is that Williams and
I
Palata?
moved, and then Palata seconded, and then
Okay.
Paul said
All
aye.
those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
And finally, bond for improvements and maintenance. Was that the last one?
Nope, you got 11.
And then 11, okay.
I do
Bonds
have a
for-
question on that one.
Bonds for improvements and maintenance, adding electric supply to that.
Okay?
I have a
Oh,
question.
and adding inspections for electric.
Janelle,
Any discussion?
question?
Yeah, we have
Yes.
a question down here at the end.
Is there a distinction here between a residential lot, a plat, or a commercial building? Requiring an electrical contractor to put in a meter or something, or a new house distribution and get a bond is not gonna happen.
Well, isn't it for only where bonds are
I've-
required?
It sounds as if it is because it says relating to performance bonds or cash deposits,
Okay.
not as a requirement.
I'm good.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, open the public hearing. Close the public hearing. Motion to approve it.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay.
And finally, 122611 minor subdivisions, adding electric transformers and electric lines to that section.
Any questions? Okay, open the public hearing, close the public hearing. Motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
What are we voting
Nay.
on?
Just
The
this one.
minors.
Just adding.
Adding
We're just adding electric.
Those are required to be noted on the recording instrument.
Yeah.
You get to see them, and that those are recorded with.
We
the-
have an electric utility, but it was never in any of the planning
Oh,
requirements,
okay.
so we just added it. Yeah. Johnny noticed that and wanted it in, so there it is.
No, do we want to do election of chair, election of vice chair?
Might as well.
Might as well, as long as we're here.
You have a
We had-
motion
Had nominations last time, right?
I
on
move
the
that,
floor.
oh.
So you've got your motion, you've got them. You made them last time?
Oh, we did?
Yes, you did.
Oh, yeah,
Because you
yeah.
have to
Yep.
nominate
right.
Yeah.
the meeting prior.
Right,
So you
remind us
have
of what we,
nominated, who's first?
Frank?
Chair, Frank
Frank.
as chair.
and Susan as vice chair.
As vice chair.
Correct.
Yeah.
So if you want to make a motion to approve the nomination,
I move that we approve the nominations made at the last meeting for chair and vice chair.
Second.
Williams, okay, you gotta do them one at a time, I hate to say that, but that's okay, we got that on the table, and, Pallotta,
Yes.
Donnell,
Yes.
Williams.
Yes.
McQueen,
Yes.
Doden,
Yes.
you're in, Doden. All right, and then motion for the vice chair?
Oh, I thought they were for both.
She said.
Oh, we didn't
I
do them
said
together?
both.
Yeah, it's supposed to, really, in
Oh.
case someone says, no, I got
Okay.
another person I want, just in case.
Motion to approve Susan for vice chair.
Second?
Doden,
Yes.
okay, McQueen,
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Donnell,
Yes.
Pallotta,
Yes.
you got some folks there, okay?
We did it.
Entertain a motion to
I
adjourn?
move we adjourn.
Second.
Second? All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
You did a great job.
He did.
Fantastic.
Really?
I really did.
Yeah, man,
You did great.
Nice,
He really did.
You did.
you were driving that truck right
I would
down
have
that
walked out a
road.
long time ago. All right.
I'm amazed.
No.
That side of the